Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the regular meeting of the DeKalb City Council, December 11, 2017. Before we have the roll call tonight, just a reminder that any folks in our audience are welcome to speak to the council tonight under public participation or at a time when the item that you may designate is on the agenda. Speaker request forms are in the back. I ask you to kindly fill that out, give it to our city clerk over here, and she will give it to me, and we will call you at the appropriate time. I'd like to ask our city clerk to call the roll, please.
Jacobson?
Here.
Finucane?
Here.
Marquardt?
Here.
Fagan?
Here.
Noriko?
Here.
Verbeck?
Here.
Favor?
Here.
Smith?
Here.
8 present.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Police Officer Mark Nachman to come forward to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our first item on the agenda tonight is approval of the agenda. And again, for those of you who are watching at home or in the audience, any item can be added or deleted from the agenda. I'd ask for are there any additions or deletions to tonight's agenda? If not, I would ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to approve tonight's agenda. Roll call.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Finucane?
Yes.
Marquardt?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbeck?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
There are no public hearings scheduled for tonight. Under special items and presentations, proudly DeKalb, no particular item for tonight. We do have a Annie Glidden North Revitalization Plan Task Force update. As you may recall, we have 2 City Council aldermen who are liaisons to our Annie Glidden North Revitalization Task Force, Alderman Finucane and Alderman Jacobson. Who would like to make that report tonight?
I will this evening. We met last week. The task force selected Herb Rubin as, by consensus, as the chair, pending approval later this evening. Our community development folks, Joellen and Jason, gave a presentation to the task force. After the presentation, the task force had a good discussion on where they thought they wanted to go, but including forming work groups to handle individual topics, and they would hold these work group meetings during future task force meetings. So I think we're making good progress. Our next meeting will be sometime next month at a date to be determined.
Very good. Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Dave, for your taking on that responsibility. And we will be asking for the approval of the chair of the Annie Glidden North Revitalization Task Force in just a few minutes. We move on to item number 2 on the agenda, presentations. I'd like to ask Executive Director of the DeKalb County Convention and Visitors Bureau, Debbie Armstrong, to give the report on the DeKalb County Convention and Visitors Bureau annual presentation. Debbie?
I have a man behind the screen here, I'm told, that's going to start my presentation. So, first of all, my name is Debbie Armstrong. I am the Executive Director of the DeKalb County Convention and Visitor Bureau. I want to thank you for the opportunity to come before you.
Sorry, we're having some difficulties with the monitors right now. I apologize.
Okay.
Working on it.
Okay. Thanks again for the opportunity to come before you tonight to share some of our accomplishments that your investment has allowed us to achieve. In your folder that you have in front of you, I'll just go through a couple of the things. You have more in there than I'm going to highlight, but you have the full report from DMO Pros. That is the firm we hired to do a third-party organizational assessment of the DeKalb County Convention and Visitor Bureau. So you have that full report that you can read about our organizational assessment. You have the annual report for FY17, and you have a 10-year history of visitor spending. That's another one of the documents there. And also DeKalb hotel tax revenue as provided by the city of DeKalb. And I want to thank you all again for your sponsorship of IHSA Destination DeKalb 2017, which was our third successful state football championship here in DeKalb County, in DeKalb and at Husky Stadium. We are working on getting more numbers for the estimated economic impact for that event, and it's, of course, as most of you know, one of the most prestigious and high-profile events the IHSA has. So I'll share some of those numbers we have a little later on in this presentation. And I'll also have a column that's going to be appearing in the Chronicle on December 19th that's going to cover mostly IHSA and the results from that as well. And in addition to that, you will be getting a quarterly partner newsletter soon, but we're going to take the opportunity to send out something on IHSA Destination DeKalb as a separate email to all of you, because we feel that it's that important to this area and the economy. So thank you very much for getting the presentation up and running. I appreciate that. I think that's Byron we have behind the screen. Some of these I'm going to go quickly on so that I don't keep you here all night. Welcome to the bicentennial year. You're all aware of that, so welcome to Bicentennial, celebrating 200 years. And these are our financial investors for FY17. You can find all of these on our website. And these are our in-kind and event sponsors. We couldn't do anything without all of you. And our mission statement is obviously to generate economic impact and promote DeKalb County as a premier destination for both business and leisure travel. This is our CBB board and staff. We have a board of 15 and a staff of 1.5. I'm the only full-time employee still. Uh-oh, I did the wrong thing. That wasn't Byron's fault. So I'm going to just give you our estimated impact for economic impact for IHSA is normally about $800,000. And here you see, below you see some of the sponsors that we had for this year, but I got some updated numbers that I just got today. And I want to tell you that the total tickets that were sold were 25,187. That's about 3,000 more than in 2015. I know that Sodexo, who is on contract and sold concessions, they did approximately 3 times the business that they did in 2015. We know we had plenty of local catering, and I want to let you know that we did have a sit-down dinner for the last team that won 8A, Lincoln Way East, for 165 in the tents. In the Spirit Zone. Brad can attest to that. He helped move all those tables to the other tents. So, and then I talked to several of the business owners, not only down by the stadium, but downtown DeKalb. And on average, people said that their business was up about 30% over last year's Thanksgiving weekend. So that's a pretty good number. So those are the numbers that we can share with you right now. As I said, we're going to add more to that as they continue to come in. So the other thing that I wanted to make sure that you all knew is we received so many compliments, not only from the IHSA, but from the fans and the teams, that they felt like they had the warmest welcome. And some of them have been here 2 and 3 times, and they said every time they look forward to coming to Husky Stadium because our community is so welcoming, and we go out of our way both with the games and in the Spirit Zone to make them feel welcome. So thank you to all of you for sponsoring that and making that possible. This is our visitor spending. We are at $93.88 million at the last report. That's a lot of money. And if you want to look at the chart there, this is before the CVB kind of got into full swing. You can see we're at 65.34. So there really is a correlation between us having a CVB and these numbers continuing to rise. So visitors to DeKalb County spent $93.88 million. It's up 8 years in a row. 6.31 million of that is in state tax receipts, 1.58 million is in local, and 570 jobs are created from tourism in DeKalb County. This slide gives you a representation of the DeKalb and Sycamore hotel tax revenue. I get these numbers from the municipalities. They provide them to us, so the numbers come strictly from the municipalities. And you can see where we're at, where we started. We just put 2011. We don't have a 10-year history here. But we're at $538,000 and some change, almost $539,000. That's pretty good for a community and a county that's got 588 hotel rooms. So the revenue for DeKalb, the hotel tax, sales tax revenue for DeKalb is $300,609.13. Not quite sure how we got the 13, but in any event, that's for 326 rooms. And you can see if you look at the breakdown, we provided the breakdown of each of the hotels and how many rooms they each have. Some of the other accomplishments we had is we were able to secure a visit from the State Director of Tourism, Corey Job. We had an event at the Egyptian Theater during National Travel and Tourism Week that I am very proud to say many of you attended. And that's a pretty good coup when he's got 40 CVBs that he's got through the whole state. So we were pretty proud that we have a good enough relationship with him that Corey would make time to be here in DeKalb County. And we, the DCCVB were featured on the Faces of Travel on social media, including the Egyptian Theater staff, Bloomin' Gardens, and the owners and Lisa Angel for Cornfest. And of course, we hosted the Office of Tourism Director for the Let's Talk Tourism presentation and a Q&A afterwards. He announced while he was here that we had our second Illinois Made Maker, which was John and Mac Orchard. The first one was Whiskey Acres. That comes with a lot of other publicity that goes on the state website. So anytime we get one of those, that's a real coup for our area. And a recap of his presentation can be found at the site that's there. That's another picture. That's our chairman of the DeKalb County Board, Mark Petrowski, giving Corey the proclamation for proclaiming National Tourism Week and honoring it in DeKalb County. It's another picture of Corey. This is something that we've worked really hard on in our office. The new enjoyillinois.com website. They have made the stipulations for this much more strenuous, and we have to have high resolution photos for everything so that everything looks wonderful when we're showing it to visitors. And I wanted to tell you we probably have over 600 entries in the Enjoy Illinois website. And in August, this won the U.S. Travels Association Mercury Award for Best Travel Website. So not only do we have good representation here, I feel, but we have good representation and backup through the state. That's some of the other pictures that you can find on Enjoy Illinois. If you haven't been on the site, I encourage you highly to do it. This is the result of some of our public relations efforts that we do, not only with magazines and print and other types of media, but with being the liaison for DeKalb County with the State Office of Tourism. Because of our relationship with the Illinois Office of Tourism, DeKalb County attractions and events get featured on Enjoy Illinois, social media, and when Corey Job does media interviews. He was most recently on WGN, Channel 9, Midday News, WGN Radio, and WCIW CIU, the Jam, talking about fall activities to do in Illinois. He talked about Johnny Mac Orchard, Prairie State, and Whiskey Acres. You can see there's our Bold Spirits brochure right here to my right. This is another result of our public relations. This was a spread that was done in Neighborhood Tourist that talked all about IHSA Destination DeKalb. It was like a 3.5-page spread. So we're really proud of our efforts because this is advertising and and publicity that we get that's free. So this is bonus. This is another one of the articles that you can see. We've had articles about this area in Neighborhood Tourist and Northwest Quarterly. This is the Illinois Enjoy Illinois magazine, which we're calling it a magazine now instead of a guide. That's the state visitor guide, and you can see here that Whiskey Acres was featured as part of the work that we do to keep the state informed. These are some of our marketing highlights. Basically, we published 30,000 guides. That's the new cider house that was at Johnny Mac Orchard. This will tell you where all of these visitors' guides go. We have 8 tourist information centers, and we pay to be partners in Tollway Oases at Belvedere, DeKalb, Hinsdale, and O'Hare. And we also have a multi-state kiosk program where you'll find our brochures and our rack cards and our visitors guide downtown and in many of the suburbs as well. And of course, Northern Illinois University keeps a stock that they use just for incoming students and families and to recruit. And then we also have them at Union Station now in Chicago. And I just want to, I guess I probably shouldn't play this. We're taking up too much time. If you haven't seen this video, our Holiday Happenings video, I highly encourage you to do it.
How long is it?
Well, it's probably about a minute 30. I don't think, can I play
Enjoy
this?
small town charm this season in DeKalb County. All throughout November and December, DeKalb County offers a little bit of everything to jumpstart your own holiday spirit. Take in a lively musical production of your holiday favorite at one of our theaters, traditional horse-drawn carriage rides, festive one-of-a-kind shopping opportunities, and even visits from the big guy himself. These and so much more await you during your next stay in DeKalb County. Holiday magic is just right around the corner. Call or visit our website to receive your free guide to begin planning your holiday family visit to DeKalb County. Plan your trip with us today.
Who wouldn't be proud to live in that county, right? And to visit it. These are our social media handles, and I just wanted to point out that we're very social media literate, and we keep connected that way with everyone. Wanted to let you know that our average monthly visits for our page sites are up almost 35% from FY16, which indicates to me that we're doing something very right with our marketing. We're averaging about 6,078 monthly visits, but as of now, we're up to a little bit over 8,000. So we continue to go in the right trend there. So I'm basically giving you information on Facebook ads, and this presentation is actually on our website. So if I'm going through too fast, you can go through and you can see what we have here. These are just some examples of our print ads. I feel like they're warm and friendly, and they really get people to pick up that page and take a look and come to our website to try to visit DeKalb County. Here are some more. We have a new Bold Spirits ad because we know that that's a big trend, and it continues to be. Everybody's aware that we've got our Bold Spirits group growing. Excuse me. And this is basically the 10 top landing pages that we have for the website. So number 1 is the calendar of events, and then number 2 is our interactive map, which when you read in your organizational assessment there, you'll see that Bill Geis from DMO Pros was greatly impressed with a CVB as small as ours with somewhat limited resources that had the initiative to put this kind of a incentive and a convenience in for their visitors, and you can see that it's well used. our business directory, our hotels, our interactive visitors guide, and then you can see as we go down the top 10. That changes some, but most of the calendar of events is number 1 all the time. This is our interactive map. So basically, we get a lot of people from the suburbs that come and visit here. And when I tell them that Sycamore or Malta is, 10 minutes away, they're used to driving in the suburbs, and they're thinking, all right, really, that's going to take me like 25 minutes. I'm like, no, 15 maybe if you hit 3 trains. So this really shows people how close things are together and how they can come here for a day or a night and be able to use this. It also enables them to go in and plan this with their friends. You can share this, and you can get on and say, okay, everybody, we're meeting here. And then you can invite them in and you can plan that. So it's a real good convenience for the customer. And since it's number 2 on our landing pages, we know it's being used. These are samples of our quarterly newsletters that we send out to our partners. We have 2 types of newsletters. One of them is a partner newsletter that's sent to about 640 local tourism partners. The other is our visitor and events newsletter, which goes to about 6,100 people that have signed up to be on that list. We still do DeKalb Kite Fest. We had another great Kite Fest this year, and it's always the second Sunday in September. This year we did something, I went just crazy and did a geofilter, so we could, on Snapchat, so we could see what would happen with that. And it was used 155 times and viewed almost 7,000 times, so that's a good thing. We're always trying to find new things that we can do to get more people involved. And I want everybody to save the date for September 9th for 2018. And then another event that I wanted to call your attention to, it seems like ages ago, but it really wasn't. Many of you were out there volunteering for the NCAA Division I Golf Championships that were held in May of 2017 out at Rich Harvest Farms. And I won't go over everything here, but we ended up with about, we had 16,425 fans that came and visited during that period of time. And you can see here on the bottom, that's the Illinois Office of Tourism mobile visitor mobile that we were able to use. And this particular day, Whiskey Acres was out helping us, so that's why you see their banner in that photo. So basically, your return on your investment, the 2016 DeKalb County visitor spending was $93.88 million. The FY17 DeKalb County hotel tax revenue was $538,000, almost $539,000. The municipal match funding, which is the local funding that we raise and receive here, was $81,500, and our matching grant from the Illinois Office of Tourism was $92,787. So if you do the math, you can see we're doing all this with a budget of about $172,000, $175,000. And, I'm really proud of what our board has been able to accomplish, but we didn't accomplish that without your investment. So I thank you very much for continuing to invest and realizing how important tourism is to DeKalb County and to the state of Illinois.
Debbie, before I turn it over to questions or comments, I see Brad Hoy, who is on your board, is here, and Brad and Debbie, you deserve such a great deal of credit for what happened at the IHSA and for what is continuing to happen in tourism. So I commend you for that. I really do. Now, any questions or comments of Debbie Armstrong regarding the DeKalb County Visitors and Tourism Bureau? None? Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you very much.
We have one more presentation this evening, and that is a proclamation for Illinois Bicentennial 1818-2018. I'm going to take the liberty of shortening up the proclamation somewhat, but let me say that whereas on Sunday, December 3, 2017, it marked Illinois' 199th birthday, as Illinois became the 21st state in the Union, in December 3, 1818. And whereas Illinois Bicentennial will be a year-long celebration between December 3, 2017 and December 3, 2018, which will be our state's 200th birthday. Therefore, be it resolved that the City of DeKalb endorses the efforts of the Illinois Bicentennial and encourages all citizens to participate and celebrate in the upcoming year by visiting Illinois200.com and using the hashtag IllinoisProud. We, as the City of DeKalb, joined a number of local municipalities and counties across this state last week. I was out of town. I asked our 5th Ward Alderman Kate Noriko to represent the city at the raising of the Illinois Bicentennial flag outside here on the flagpole. At the same time, I think we also raised the NIU Huskies flag, which was given to us a couple of weeks ago. So it made a nice 2-on-2 tandem. Kate, would you like to say a few words about the flag raising?
Well, I appreciated the efforts of Public Works because it was an incredibly windy day, and I have to admit I was grateful that employees from Public Works were in that little I don't know what you call it, carriage or something, going up, as opposed to my having to get into it and go up. I had a much easier role on the ground, just making a few comments to, acknowledge the state's anniversary and to welcome NIU also, and once again highlight, the strong ties between NIU and the city.
Now, a couple of weeks ago, you also represented us as Santa came to town. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, and I must live under a golden cloud because the weather was a whole lot warmer than it could have been, and I had a young man with me, my soon-to-be grandson, 7 years old, and so the fact that we were first in line to greet Santa, really helped me with Aiden. And the crowd, and there was a crowd getting ready and lining up to see Santa, helped me give a big hello to Santa. We did a countdown for the hello, and everybody was thrilled, and Santa looked ready to greet a lot of children and make promises. So I hope Santa's working really hard.
Kate, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Moving along under presentations, approval of the mayor's appointments. First of all, the appointment of Herb Rubin as chair of the Annie Glidden North Revitalization Plan Task Force. As Alderman Fanouken preluded, I'd ask for a motion to approve that appointment, please.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
Today, during my time in the office, I was notified that we had 2 resignations from a couple of folks who have been serving on a couple of our 14 boards and commissions across the city. That leaves 4 vacancies. One is the Police Pension Board. I have 1 vacancy there. We have 1 vacancy on the Finance Advisory Committee. I've been reluctant to really name a new person there until we get through our current budget process. Today, I learned that we do have a resignation from a young lady from the DeKalb Public Library Board, and we have a resignation from the DeKalb Environmental Commission. So as is the case in the past, as I've done in the past, I would ask for anybody who may either be interested or know of someone who might be interested in serving on environmental, finance advisory, police pension board, and DeKalb Library Board, please send me an email, give me a call, and we'll move forward and hopefully have a recommendation for 1, 2, or all 4 of those here within the next 30 to 60 days. Okay, moving along to number 4 on tonight's agenda, and that's public participation. This is a section of our agenda during which we ask folks to comment on something that is not listed on tonight's agenda. I've had one taker on that, and that is Kay Shelton. Kay?
Well, these meetings used to be a little bit later. The COW used to start at 6. This regular meeting used to start at 7. I have found the angriest person in DeKalb about the proposed parking permits, but he is still at work, so he could not be here. So I do have his words. I would suggest that somebody at some point really considers thinking about moving some of these meetings back a little bit. If you have a meeting that starts at 5 o'clock, that really doesn't help anybody who's working. And you know, it used to start at 6 and 7, maybe a compromise 5:30 and 6:30. If this had started at 6:30 or 7, I think this gentleman would have been here. Well, this is one of Alderman Jacobson's constituents who lives on Charles Street, Jay Lamar. He is calling the, I've got his words here, he's calling the proposed charge for the parking permits on Charles Street and all the parking whatnot, quote, stupid, unquote. He already has a parking permit for Charles Street. He has that for free, and that is already designated as a residential street. He also has 4 guest hang tags, which they got for free from the city. And he calls the police when they are having people over so that their visitors don't get towed. And these are folks, let me tell you, these folks like to eat. I think they're probably single-handedly keeping at least one grocery store in town in business. So these are folks that entertain quite a bit, but you know, these are adults who've been here, they're lifelong DeKalb residents, and they're pretty annoyed about having to pay. So one last quote, make the city know that I am not paying for a permit. They will have to pull it off my cold, dead back. The city needs to know how serious I am about not paying, unquote. Thank you. I'll have my own comments later, but do me a
that was
favor.
my question. Kay, I notice you have also filled out a request to address the parking issue, but you'll prefer to do that when we get to that item on the
Yeah,
agenda.
separate my ideas from the person I'm trying to do a favor for.
Right,
Yes.
I understand.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the audience who would like to speak to something that is not on tonight's agenda? If not, let's move along then to item F, consent agenda. Again, as you may recall, all items listed on the consent agenda are enacted in one motion. There's not a separate discussion of these items unless requested by a council member, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda. The items on tonight's consent agenda: number 1, approval of city council minutes. A, minutes of city council special committee of the whole meeting of November 6, 2017. B, minutes of the special committee of the whole meeting of November 7, 2017. C, minutes of the committee of the whole meeting of November 13, 2017. D, minutes of the regular city council meeting of November 13, 2017. E, minutes of the joint City Council and Finance Advisory Committee meeting of November 16, 2017. And F, approval of executive session minutes. Number 2 on the consent agenda, receive and file. A, accounts payable and payroll through December 11, 2017 in the amount of $3,108,488.79. Number 3, approval of the 2018 schedule of meetings. 4, Resolution 2017-134, approving the cancellation of the December 26, 2017 Committee of the Whole and regular meeting of the City Council, and approving the payment of invoices for the second part of December 2017 prior to the January 8, 2018 regular City Council meeting. Number 5, Resolution 2017-135, authorizing a restaurant full-service liquor license for Fushi Yami Restaurant LLC, doing business as Fushi Yami, 822 West Lincoln Highway. Number 6, Resolution 2017-136, authorizing the city manager to sign agreements for insurance coverage effective January 1, 2018 through December 31, 2018 in the amount of $528,228. Number 7, Resolution 2017-137, authorizing the city manager, authorizing the Public Works Director to extend the professional services agreement with WBK Engineering LLC for city engineer services in an amount not to exceed budgeted amounts and for a period not to exceed 180 days. And finally, on the consent agenda, number 8, Resolution 2017-138, authorizing the city manager to sign an agreement with Environmental Systems Research Institute, Inc., for the renewal of desktop software maintenance and online subscription services in the amount not to exceed $22,095. I'd ask for a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
Okay, moving along, item G, items for separate action. A number of folks have asked for the ability to make comments on some of these, and I'll try to keep these straight since a number of folks have a number of items that they'd like to speak on. So this is ordinance 2017-047, repealing Chapter 39 Municipal Occupation Taxes, Section 39.01 Municipal Retailers Occupation Tax, and Section 39.02 Municipal Service Occupation Tax, and amending Chapter 57 City Sales Tax, Section 57.03 Tax Imposed, to repeal a 0.5% increase as adopted by Ordinance 2003-100. This is the second reading scheduled for this. Prior to the motion to bring this on the table, I'd like to ask our city manager, Anne Marie Gora, who has some information regarding this, asking us for the possibility of postponing action on this item and also on item number 2. Is that correct?
That's correct. Thank you, Mayor.
Sure.
As you said, both G1 and G2 go hand in hand, the ordinance repealing Chapter 39 and amending Chapter 57, because one is repealing a 0.5% sales tax and the other is reinstituting it. So at the last meeting, November 27th, our city attorney, Dean Frieders, went into detail the history with the Peace Road Interchange Improvement Agreement with, it was an intergovernmental agreement with DeKalb County and how this additional sales tax came to be and the amount that was given to the county over a period of time. So if you want, we can go into detail, but I want to give you a summary of since that November 27th meeting, the mayor and I, as well as the city attorney, had the opportunity to meet with county officials to discuss this whole intergovernmental agreement. I talked about this at the special city council meeting last Monday and went in depth in this. It was a very productive meeting. We agreed to have a follow-up meeting, which is going to be tentatively scheduled for this Thursday afternoon, where the mayor and I will have an opportunity for a follow-up discussion. What I talked about last week is what transpired in the meeting is we talked about the productive intergovernmental cooperation that the two entities have had. They talked about the history of this site. One of the things we talked about then was an area that we were looking for further discussion with them, which was specifically Peace Road, that we get the impact of the landfill, but none of the benefit of the landfill because the way that the traffic is routed coming off of I-88. So at that meeting, the county administrator said he was going to have a follow-up discussion with the county engineer to see what assistance, if any, could be provided. I know I put in a call to him last week, and we've had an email exchange today that there's been some communication, and he wants to share that with the mayor and myself on Thursday. So what is in the agenda packet is based on the discussion with the council at the last couple of meetings, is to ask that you take no action on this item. Specifically, the recommendation is that the mayor and I would continue to have discussions with the council. Based upon those initial discussions, our recommendation is to defer taking action on this item at this time. The city council is requested to move to continue consideration to a future meeting at a time to be determined by the mayor. However you want to phrase the motion, I would defer to our city attorney. But in essence, to summarize this succinctly, is we are continuing to have discussions with them, not only on the Peace Road interchange agreement, but to see what, where the discussions go to be able to address some issues of concern the city may have. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or turn it over to our city attorney if you want more specific recommendation on a motion.
Prior to asking Dean any item, and before we have public comment on this and city council discussion, as you know, on the last regular city council meeting, I was taken aback a little bit about how quickly this was going forward and the fact that we had not really had the chance to discuss this as completely as I think a number of us thought that we should be on this with the county. And so we sat down with Gary Hansen, the county administrator, Mark Petrowski, the county board chair, and Tracy Jones, one of the veteran county board members, and really agreed to have further discussions on this. And so I think what our city manager is asking is that we delay a vote on that. And I would suspect that what we would need then, and I'll defer to our city attorney on this, for items number 1 and number 2 on tonight's agenda, under items for separate action, it would be appropriate to have a motion to delay action on those 2 items. Is that correct?
Yes, Mayor. As the city manager indicated, our recommendation would be to have a motion to postpone consideration of those to a date and time to be determined by the mayor.
Okay. Now, what I'd like to do is get this on the table first, and then we'll open it up for any comments from city council or from our public, our attendees here tonight. I'd entertain a motion then to postpone action on number 1 and number 2. I read the first one, let me read the second one. Ordinance 2017-048, amending Chapter 57, City Sales Tax, and Section 57.03, Tax Imposed, to implement a 0.5% increase. I'd entertain a motion to postpone.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Now, prior to our vote, I'd like to ask anyone who would like to speak to this item And I see that Dwayne Brown,
Well, since it's been postponed, I'll just,
okay, so you don't want to speak to it tonight. Okay, nobody else, I think, in the audience
Mr. Mayor.
Likes to speak to that? Yes, Alderman Fanouken.
Just a question, I don't know how to direct it to Anne Marie or to our finance director, but with the way the budget was set up, there was the $245,000 we had in anticipated revenues from this. So how will that impact where we go with the budget tonight?
Sure. Director Talkington, you want to address that?
For this evening, you could adopt the budget the way it is, and we can do an amendment to the FY18 budget. Once you get past the point of hearing what all the discussions were between the county and city manager and the mayor, and then make a decision when you have all the information at that time, and then you could amend the budget to add that funding back to it.
All right, thank
And
you.
can I just add, in the reality, what Director Talkington has expressed is in the past, the city has not quote-unquote cut the check for the county till towards the end of the calendar year. And what we've talked at previous meetings is really, I think, a critical timing decision path for the council would be by, I think we said April of this year. So I think in the next month or so, we're going to continue to have very productive conversations with the county, and we would plan on coming back and presenting that to you in a public meeting as to how those talks have progressed.
Thank you. I just wanted to acknowledge that that was a segment in the budget. Thank you.
Sure. Any other comments? Yes.
Just to confirm, Mr. Mayor, Alderman Fanouken, your motion was to postpone to a date and time determined by the mayor then?
Right, the mayor, yes.
You comfortable with that motion?
Very.
Okay. Any further discussion? The motion is to postpone this, these two items. Roll call, please.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Markwart,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. Item number 3 on tonight's agenda, ordinance 2017-049, authorizing the 2017 levy and 2018 collection of taxes in and for the corporate and municipal purposes and special service areas of the city of DeKalb for the fiscal year 2018. This is second reading of the ordinance. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second?
Been moved and seconded. Speaking to this is our Finance Director, Molly Talkington.
Good evening. As council directed earlier this year, in this last quarter, that the 2017 levy should be set at the growth of the equalized assessed valuation. And so that growth was 5.2% increase over the 2016 levy, which results in a total levy before abatement, which is our next item, of $12,279,001 with a rate of 1.66, and it actually went down to 2.2 versus the 2.9 we're seeing, because there was an adjustment to the Greek Row SSA. And so from first reading to this reading, and looking at the utility and the lights that were included in the Greek Row SSA, some of the lights were miscoded to the Greek Row SSA, and the expenditures for Greek Row was reduced to $18,000 for the expenditures, and the revenue was decreased down to $18,000 from the $21,000 that was included in the first presentation of this levy. And with that change, that adjusted the SSA's total value of to $27,000 on the levy. You have the library operations levy at $2.3 million, debt service levy, so it's a $3.9 million levy, but we abate all but the levy for library debt, and the library ends up paying that, but it's under the city's levy. So the portion of the debt that would remain if you abate at the next item would be $482,000 of that $3.9 million, and we cover the remainder of that through other revenue sources at the city. And the police and fire pension are included to be funded at the 7% investment rate of return, but there's no IMRF funding in the levy, and about $518,000 to cover the funding needs for police, fire, and IMRF have been shifted to other general fund revenues. And with that, seek direction.
Okay. I'd open it up to any questions or comments. I think we pretty much talked about this at length during the workshops and during the last couple of meetings. If there is no further discussion, roll call, please.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
No.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
7 yes.
Motion passes. Item number 4, ordinance 2017-050, abating taxes levied for corporate purposes of the city of DeKalb for the tax levy year 2017. This is relating to bonds. Second reading, Molly Talkington again.
So just as we discussed at the property tax levy, this is to abate the taxes for debt for the city purposes. So you're abating almost $5 million that will be covered by other revenues from the city for city purpose debt. $482,350 will remain under that levy because it's for library debt purposes. Thank you.
Did we get a motion on that? No, we didn't. Okay. Sorry about that. I'd ask for a motion to approve this ordinance.
So moved. Seconded.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Thank you for that report. Now, any further questions or discussions? Again, we had talked about this pretty much at length during the previous meetings. No further discussion. Roll call, please.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Number 5, ordinance 2017-054, amending Chapter 66, motor fuel tax. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Molly Talkington again.
Thank you. So as per council direction at our December 4th meeting, this ordinance would increase the local motor fuel tax rate by 2 cents per gallon for a total rate at the city of 5.5 cents per gallon. The 2 cent increase is to address the need for street funding, and that would be the purpose of the increase. The discussion was started because we had removed the proposed home rule sales tax that was the original draft of the proposed budget, and for street funding, looked to the local motor fuel tax. For the FY18 year, to enact the increase, the report shows an effective date of March 1st. It's essentially time for staff to then notify businesses if the increase is passed, what needs to happen for them to adjust, and then have it effective March 1st. So you're going to have a shortened year for FY18. That would be approximately $300,000 in the FY18 budget, but annually 2 cents is about $360,000 going forward to help go towards the streets. And there's really a nexus between those who are paying the tax, because they're the drivers on our streets, so they're buying fuel. So the funding that we're looking at increasing with the 2 cent per gallon is going to fund those streets that drivers are using. Thank you.
We have 2 folks in the audience who have indicated their desire to speak to this, and before we have council discussion, one is Dwayne Brown. Dwayne?
Dwayne Brown, 4th Ward. Few things generate more attention and anxiety among American consumers than the price of gasoline and diesel fuel. Beyond having concerns over price increases, customers find it difficult to understand how prices can vary so much from neighborhood to neighborhood. 4 elements determine the price consumers pay for gasoline and diesel fuel: the price of crude oil, taxes, refining costs and profits, and distribution and marketing costs. Of the 4 elements that control price, Taxes are the only one that we really have much control over. Gasoline prices generally rise sharply in the spring, peaking around Memorial Day. Prices then begin to fall and stabilize somewhat in the summer, although they remain substantially higher than winter. Prices rise again leading up to Labor Day, after which they usually fall steeply for winter. Taxes are a significant component of the price of gasoline, and the average federal and state taxes on a gallon of gasoline have increased from 24.5 cents in 1990 to 37.5 cents in 2004. The Illinois current motor fuel gas tax is 19 cents per gallon, plus 1.1 cents storage and environmental fee, plus 6.25 sales tax, and 18.4% per gallon federal tax. These costs make Illinois gas tax burden the fourth highest state surcharge on fuel in the country. What difference does it make paying a few cents more per gallon in sales tax? If you fill up your car's 15-gallon tank twice a month, you are paying more than $110 annually. 2 cents per gallon does make a difference. Don't make DeKalb uncompetitive. Reject this increase. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne. Kay Shelton?
This fits in with the budget, which is coming up a couple of lines down. On page 172 of the budget, it sure looks like home rule motor fuel tax, $269,956 under the airport fund. I sure hope that's not motor fuel tax going towards the airport. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. Now, discussion of this ordinance. This is first reading. We're being asked also to consider waiver of second reading. Any discussion? Alderman Noriko.
Given the fact that we are faced with deteriorating streets, which everyone seems to agree with, and agree with the concept that we're facing deteriorating streets, and we all experience that. And we eliminated one option in terms of helping fund street maintenance and repair. This presents a possibility of additional funding that, you know, is tied to individuals who are using the streets. And while additional taxes are never a good thing and never easy to pass and not popular, I think we have a responsibility to pass this, because certainly all of us here on the council, you know, have talked about how much we hear about poor condition of the streets. So I'm in favor of this.
Thank you. Any other discussion from City Council? Alderman Finucane.
Well, as we talked about at a couple of our previous meetings, the burden of this tax is not going to fall just on residents of the city of DeKalb. We're fortunate that we do have one of the tollway oases within our jurisdiction, and I believe about 1/3 of the impact of this tax will be felt by people who are passing through on the tollway rather than all on the residents of DeKalb. So it is a way for us to obtain some additional dollars for our roads, not just from within the DeKalb taxpayer.
Thank you. Alderman Faber.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm in agreement too. I don't know if I have the math correctly, but if a person uses 2 tanks of fuel, 15 gallons, this 2 cents is going to be 30 cents per fill-up. So twice a month is 60 cents. Over a year, that's $7.20 is their contribution to the 2 cent increase. So I don't feel that this is a huge impact or huge burden, as we've already discussed, and the money goes directly to the streets, which is a big plus.
Thank you, Tony. Alderman Verbeek.
Well, in addition to my comments at the previous meeting, we have an economic development committee for a purpose. what is the impact of this increase as it relates to DeKalb's economy. I think, again, we're premature, but understand why council members are voicing this as opposed to sales tax. But what I ask is, let's get some input from the Economic Development Committee, let's get some input from some gas station owners in the city before we go forward with this. Thank you.
Any further discussion? We're voting on the first reading. Roll call, please.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
No.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
No.
Smith?
Yes.
6 yes.
Now, I would entertain a motion to waive second reading.
I'd like to make that motion.
Okay. Made by Alderman Fagan,
Second?
seconded by Alderman Favor. Any further discussion on the motion to waive second reading? Roll call.
Jacobson?
No.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
No.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
No.
Favor?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
5 yes.
So the
Motion
motion for
fails.
second reading would fail as that requires a 2/3 supermajority vote.
Okay, so we've passed it on first reading, we'll have to bring second reading back at the next. Will that require a special meeting prior to us approving the budget?
No, because I anticipate an effective date of March 1st, so the budget already reflects that the first few months you wouldn't receive funding for it, and so we've already kind of anticipated a delay in this funding. So it would be an amendment. You could pass the budget today with the local motor fuel tax included, and then if it fails on second reading it fails at second reading, we could amend the budget then to remove it from the budget. But you haven't started actually collecting that tax or
I see.
any of that
Okay.
because we were anticipating a March 1st start.
So from a layman's point of view, we could pass this tonight if, assuming the budget then passes, if second reading of this were to fail, even if that were done after the first of the year, we're still going to be okay because of that March 1 date that you talk about. We would then need an amendment to the budget. Is that?
Right, you'd have to amend the budget if it failed on second reading.
Right,
but-
right, precisely, right.
Mayor, if I could also add, I think it depends on, quite frankly, the action of the council on the next item with the budget. As you may recall, we ended up having a special council meeting last week to review the budget to try to iron out any of the issues. And based on the direction from that meeting, we have it listed as first reading on the agenda. So if the council decides you're just going to do first reading, we would need to schedule a separate meeting by the end of the year to do second reading, or the council would have the option of passing on first reading, waiving on second, seeing the number of public meetings that you have reviewed the budget and the Finance Advisory Committee has reviewed the budget. So if the council decides to schedule a separate meeting, you may then want to consider whether you'd want this item, the ordinance 2017-054, amending Chapter 66 motor fuel tax. If the council decides to take action tonight on first reading and second reading on the budget, then I would suggest that this item would be listed on your next regularly scheduled meeting, which would be the January 8th city council meeting.
Okay. My question, though, I think the cogent point to me was the fact that we could take this action tonight and still not have to worry about a special meeting yet in 2017.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's
Okay,
correct.
Good. So we approved that on first reading, failed on the second reading because of the 2/3?
Yes, Mayor.
2/3 vote requirement. Thank you. Item number 6, ordinance 2017-051, adopting the annual budget of the city of DeKalb, Illinois for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2018, and ending December 31, 2018, in the amount of $93,720,356. This is first reading of the annual budget. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second?
Been moved and seconded. I know there are some folks who'd like to speak to this before Molly. I guess not. I'm sorry. Okay, Molly talking.
All right. Thank you. Actually, in reference to the comments that were made by Ms. Hajijic earlier at the Committee of the Whole, I wanted to clarify the salary information. In this proposed budget, the non-bargaining unit is not receiving pay increases, but however, the union contracts are receiving pay increases per their contracts. Overall, this proposed budget was initially released to the public on October 25th with the focus on safety and development. Since then, there have been several reviews and revisions to this budget that went through, Financial Advisory Committee and Council as a whole. Ultimately, the reviews and revisions, it starts on page 2. You can kind of see the line items as it goes through, what was added or removed from the budget. But ultimately, the general fund revenues were lowered about $900,000, and the expenditures were reduced by $936,000 for the FY18 budget. That brings expenditures for the general fund to $37.7 million. The general fund balance is at 25.7% of expenditures, or about $9.69 million. There were also revisions to other funds, to capital projects and equipment that reflected the no increase in the home rule sales tax. But in the capital projects fund, some of that was offset if you continue with the local motor fuel tax. So that has been included here. And then overall, for all funds, the revenues are now proposed at $92.3 million, and the expenditures in total are at the $93.7 million. Thank you.
And again, I think we've probably discussed this quite a bit over the last several weeks, but I would open it to any discussion by any council members. Alderman Noriko.
I have a question under Human Resources. The tuition reimbursement is only reduced by $7,900. Does that reflect the review of, individuals who are currently in a program? Okay, very good, thank you.
Any further discussion? This is first reading of the annual budget, City of DeKalb, January 1, 2018, December 31, and Alderman Verbeek.
What are the ramifications for not passing our budget by the end of the calendar year?
We would not be in compliance with Illinois budget law that indicates that a municipality must pass its budget before the start of its fiscal year.
How does that differ from the state not approving its budget?
I, off the top of my head, don't know what the state statutory requirements are with respect to the state passing its budget. I think one of the fundamental differences would be the state legislature is the body that establishes the state laws that govern the state's budget process, whereas even though the city is home rule, we still are required to follow state law, portions of state law with respect to it, and I do not believe the city has any home rule relief from that requirement, so we would technically not be in compliance with the state budget law.
And what are the possible penalties for that, or do you know?
The statute doesn't call out any specific penalties. It's not a statute that indicates that it's a criminal act, for example. The challenges would be, from a technical perspective, maintaining city operations and incurring expenditures in the absence of a budget. From a technical perspective, contracts and obligations of the city are premised in the foundation that there's some underlying appropriation or budget for the funding. And in the absence of that, if the city was operating without a budget, it could cause some technical concerns in that regard. I think separately, we always try to identify what all of the applicable legal requirements are and ensure that we adhere to them. So from a legal recommendation perspective, whether I can point you to a specific statutory penalty or not, it certainly would be a recommendation that you comply with all laws that we identify, including those which require the city to establish a budget prior to the start of the fiscal year.
And I would just add, and I would defer to Director Talkington if she has more information on this, it may have impact on any future review by Moody's if the council did not approve a budget with accordance of state laws. So I don't know, Director Talkington, anything to add to that?
No, I believe it would be a part of a rating review. It could negatively affect our review.
I only say that because I'm uncomfortable with a $1.5 million budget deficit, and what I wanted to offer was just to say, I'm willing to work on it into the next fiscal year.
Thank you, Mike. Any further discussion? This is first reading of the annual budget approval. Alderman Jacobson.
Well, I don't know if not passing the budget is even an option at this point. I would agree that this budget is not a balanced budget. It's taking from fund balance, which we will need already planned on in future years to cover other liabilities and deficits. I don't feel comfortable passing a budget where we still have not addressed the structural deficiencies, and while I appreciate that it now is becoming a focus for us and will be in the very near future, allowing it to go one more year before we tackle the issue will make it harder and more painful to make the cuts necessary to balance next year, and I don't think that's good practice, so I will not be voting yes for this budget.
Alderman Orico.
I don't think this budget is perfect, and probably for different reasons than some of my colleagues think. But I think an honest effort was made on the part of city staff based on council direction. I think council worked hard to come to an accommodation. And, you know, I'm using the word accommodation carefully because that does imply that it's not perfect. But we have to take action. And I think making a grandstanding gesture of not passing the budget is falling into the same trap that the state legislators did. We're going to show that we're above the process, and we're going to draw a line in the sand and let people be heard so that we can make a point. I think we acknowledge what issues there might be, what problems. We continue to work on them, but we need to fulfill our responsibilities.
Any further discussion?
Mayor, can I address the difference between revenue and expenditures?
Sure.
So it was in one of the budget reviews previously in the additional information handout, but the majority of the revenue or the expenditures exceeding revenues is in TIF 1, our central business TIF. So some of that is we have items budgeted in the central business TIF to bring development and work on kind of the economic spur in TIF 1. So there is some budgeting for potential developments there. And because TIF 2 and TIF 1 are next to each other, TIF 2 does have a healthy fund balance and could support TIF 1 if the TIF 1 developments that you are supporting are a benefit for TIF 2. But because they're potential developments, we didn't purposely didn't budget TIF 2 covering the difference in TIF 1 until we can fully identify what developments are in TIF 1 and if that development would be supporting of TIF 2 to make sure that we're in compliance with the TIF law. So what would happen then in 19 is after we've gone through and some of those developments have come online or started down the process, is then we would find which ones fit that mutual benefit for TIF 1 and TIF 2, and the funding would then be moved from TIF 2 to TIF 1, so you would no longer have that kind of unevenness that you're seeing in TIF 1 right now.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, if I could just add on that too, and then I'm not sure the exact concerns. If there's concern in the general fund, the other option that you have is when you think of the discussion that we had on the Public Works truck, my recommendation anyways is going to be to defer not purchasing that vehicle until the latter half of the year, because the reality is by the time you write the bid specs and put that out to bid, there's no way we would have the benefit of it for this snow season. So to give the council a level of comfort, I believe that was like about $144,000, is that if we see how the fund balance is trending, you always have the option of not purchasing that vehicle to make sure that we have enough in the fund balance and that the revenues do meet the expenditures. So that's another option for consideration that gives you some level of comfort of saying, all right, delay action on purchasing that vehicle to later in the fiscal year to give an understanding of where we're at as we progress through the fiscal year.
The motion on the floor is to approve the first reading of the 2018 annual budget.
Mayor, I had a speaker request for that.
Did you have that on your?
Yeah.
Yeah, come ahead, go ahead then, Dwayne.
Dwayne Brown. I just want to keep it brief. We're regressing on this budget. We had the proposal for 5% cuts across the board, which seemed too drastic. Now we're talking about 2 cents a gallon gas tax, a 0.5% tax off the county agreement, and we've got $1.5 million budget on this deficit. I think we need to go back and stop talking about tax increases, start talking about cuts. We have to work with that. The solution has always been more taxes, increase the public, increase the taxes. Well, we see how that works. Look at our downtown area, look at the vacant stores, look at the vacant plants we have here. Look at the growth we're getting, or no growth. It's not working. What we have to do, we have to make the necessary cuts. We have too much personnel. On this budget, our pensions, they're going to be funded less. Look at the pensions. They continue the funded amount to decrease every year. Look from even 2 or 3 years ago. We can't sustain this. We're going to be in the same situation as the state is. I say we go back, we look again at the 5% cuts. I know it's difficult, but we've got to find other solutions. $1.5 million budget deficit is unacceptable, and the current budget in its current form is unacceptable. We have to look at other things. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne. Given no further comments, roll call, please.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
No.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
No.
Smith?
Yes.
6 yes.
I'd entertain a motion to waive second reading.
I'd like to make that motion.
You'd move that? Okay.
Second.
Been moved by Alderman Fagan, second by Alderman Fanouken, that we waive second reading, which would give final approval to the 2018 FY budget. Any further discussion?
Just further clarification on the council on waivers of second reading. Just as we've done with the consent agenda, in keeping with the repeated discussion of the council that when you make a motion to waive second reading, that is being recorded as that we're waiving second reading and actually approving whatever's before the council on that motion. So the council's had a number of discussions about that. I see Alderman Markwart's concern on that topic. We are certainly monitoring that. Unless the council directs otherwise, though, we're going to continue following that process where when an alderman makes a motion to waive second reading, we understand that as your legislative act of approval.
Okay. Any further discussion on the waiver of second reading motion? Roll call.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
No.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
No.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
6 yes.
Motion is passed. Moving along, item number 7, ordinance 2017-052, amending Chapter 51 Traffic, Schedule C, Parking Prohibited, subsection 33, Resident Parking Only Tow Zone, subsection 35, No Parking 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., subsection 36, No Parking at Any Time, Tow Zone, and adopting section 51-32, Resident Parking Permits for on-street parking. This is the second reading of this ordinance, this proposed ordinance. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. There are a couple of folks who'd like to speak to this. Kay Shelton. Thank you, Kate.
So not that long ago, we just spent $15 million for a new police station, and we were told before that passed that that was meant to cut back on crime on the west and northwest side of DeKalb. And what has that done? So there are a lot of folks who are skeptical, I think with good reason. And that's one big reason, is the new police station and its location. And some folks did suggest that it should be north of where it is now, if it just had to be closer to where the crime was. Other people were in favor of expanding this building instead. So we've already spent $15 million on a new police station. Now, $25 for parking permits. If a lot of theaters can print paper tickets and mail them out for $2, then I think the city should be able to print and mail stickers for no more than $5. $25 sounds too much because a lot of people are already paying for parking. Local apartments charge parking permits, and they're already paying. And a lot of those apartment complexes, they don't have enough space, so a lot of times people who have paid to park in those spaces, they're parking on the street anyway. So now you're asking those folks to pay twice. Also, if somebody's got a Kishwaukee College permit, you know they belong here. They're not from somewhere else. They belong in the city of DeKalb. They've got a Kishwaukee College permit. And you can see that on their cars. If you don't know what it looks like, I can show you one. NIU permits, I'm sure the police are already familiar with what NIU permits look like, and those are definitely not cheap. So people are already paying for those. Staff, students, commuter students, and whatnot. So, charging people twice to know who should be here and who shouldn't be here, some people are already paying for that. Also, folks who have single-car driveways, a lot of them have to park on the street. So this is basically punishing a family that has a single-car driveway versus somebody who's got a bigger driveway who they don't have to park on the street. So $25 is too much. If this is really about crime and not about revenue, prove it, really, because we've spent $15 million for the police station. And one last thing, Ames, Iowa. Oh, I've been to Ames, Iowa lots of times. If you get on the road out here, Lincoln Highway, and just head west, you will go right through Ames, Iowa. They do have some weird parking restrictions there. And I was just there in June. Now, I used to live in Russia. I had no car for 9 months. So my concept of where I can, leave a car and walk is totally different because I went with no car. So I'm willing to walk 10 blocks, 8 blocks, wherever. Ames, Iowa, the parking was so bizarre, I didn't even bother to stop at the shops and their farmers market. My buddy and I, we wanted to stop in a local church. We had trouble finding a parking spot just to go to church. Somebody, nice person, saw my Illinois plate, waved us down and was pointing. They had figured out that we were from out of town trying to go to church, and they helped us find a parking space. So you really don't want to take this too far and frustrate your out-of-town visitors who really have, good intentions to be there. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. I sort of went out of the order. I know we have a couple of people who would like to speak, but I'd like to ask Gene Lowry, our police chief, who has been charged with crafting some of the suggestions we have for this particular ordinance, ordinance, to make a few comments, and then we will have some more public comments. Gene?
Thank you, council and staff and community and other employees represented here tonight. Really, I think the citizen input is really good. I think it's incumbent upon us to hear it. Whether or not that is inputted into the ordinance is part of the decision you have to make. I do appreciate the concerns, and if you would like the other folks who are here to speak ahead of me, I would appreciate that as well.
Would you prefer that?
That would be great.
Okay. Let's see. Mike Welsh. Hello, Michael.
Thank you, Michael Welsh. I have lived in this area for 50-some years, and actually, spent a couple, 3 years of the last 3 years advocating for some real changes, because we people who lived there saw the crime figures going up. Not as figures, but as day-to-day activities. I think the overall attempt to change the parking is a good plan. It's part of what we talked about in the Northwest Homeowners Association. I'm going to stop right now and say, 3 years ago I suggested to city officials that if changes didn't happen, that the neighborhoods weren't going to be like they are. And in the last 2 years, 5 of the 8 long-term homeowners on the cul-de-sac I lived on, Evergreen Circle, have left. And those homeowners represented an average of 31 years of living on that street. And I would stop and say, the people that are buying and moving onto those streets aren't those same kind of people. And so what you're finding now is, because of lack of attention in the past, those people just refuse to live there, and it snowballs. Okay. The two issues that I really want to hit is the permits for people living on their own little cul-de-sac. I think it makes sense to say residents only, because otherwise you're just driving the people from Russell and Normal, onto these little streets where they only have 6 or 8 parking spaces on those cul-de-sacs. Excuse me. So turning around and offering to sell a permit for whatever amount, $25 or something, it isn't going to strike people as a reasonable thing to happen, and I think other people have mentioned that already. But that's really not my major issue. My major issue is in 1995-96, there was an attempt to put another 300 units on Russell Road, a la, if you will, a phase 4 of University Villages. And the far-sighted people that lived in the neighborhood sat down, and my suggestion was, let's make it a park so that it doesn't have 300 more apartment units. And I think that was the right thing to do. The city of DeKalb helped to do that. The Park District and the state of Illinois helped to do that. So now we have a 10-acre park there that was designed by the citizens with a lot a lot of input, and that serves not just that neighborhood, but really the whole northwest side of DeKalb. People come from a good distance to use that park. Unfortunately, there's people that come from a good distance to use that park that don't do legal things. And we put the shelter house very close to the road so that it could be watched and looked over. In turn, it became a place where people would park on the street, because there's no parking for Welsh Park, it's street parking, and watch for police or other people to give word to the people that are parking on the street. The people were sitting in the shelter house, and kind of notify them that something was happening, that they ought to put their illegal activities away. I very, very strongly have advocated for the last 3 years that we remove 15 parking places adjacent to the shelter house because of that kind of activity. But the other activity that has been happening is that there are parties that go on and continue on in that vicinity of the shelter house to 11, 12, 1. Whenever we started calling, an hour later somebody would come and kind of try and break that up. The problem is we finally have gotten the park district to say, oh, okay, we'll close down the park at dusk, which nobody was willing to do for 3 years, but we now have a crime problem and we're willing to do that. But that doesn't close down the people that are parking adjacent to the shelter house. Because the police look at that and say, well, they're really in the street. They're on that, between the sidewalk and here. So 50 and 60 people continue to do what we think we're going to stop without. And I'm willing to say, let's not have those 15 parking spaces unless somebody has rented the shelter house during reasonable hours, and then they can, get permits to park there. And these other issues, yes, they help, but it doesn't help the problem in the park. And unfortunately, or fortunately, my name's attached to that park, and I just as soon not hear some of the things that go on in that park happening. And it just makes sense. Now, it's not normal, it's not what we've done in the past, but what we're looking at now is doing things that make sense to solve specific problems. And that 15 parking spaces right next to the shelter house, that's the problem.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. I think we have one other person to speak to this, Katie Stoddard. Yeah, I've got your sheet already.
No, this is for her to speak up. So I first want to say thank you for allowing us to speak on this. But I have to tell you, I am really disturbed by this, and I had planned on coming in with a long, drawn-out explanation, but I had to scribble because this is finals week, and so I've been busy with students. This really is not about crime, and I wish that everyone would just call it for what it is. It is about the budget, period. If it was about crime, the budget would have never been addressed to begin with. And that was the first red flag. There's been several red flags throughout this entire situation. However, I attended the SA meeting on last Sunday, and it was quite awakening, like very alarming actually, because of some of the things that were being said. And I think this is really targeting students, number one, but number two, because it is about the budget, we have to get money somewhere, and that's exactly where they're targeting, is trying to get money out of the students. If it wasn't for NIU, DeKalb would be a shell of what it actually is. In fact, we all know this, and we hear people all the time say, get rid of NIU. These students are causing all kinds of problems. Well, you know what? They aren't causing all these problems. The problems that are happening, most of them, are not NIU students. So I don't understand why we are actually targeting those students. Because if I was a parent of a student and my child's car got towed, ticketed, impounded, I would be livid. The amount of money that they actually shell out to not only the university, but DeKalb, period, through restaurants, gas stations, liquor stores, even the city of DeKalb, right here, this government, the police department, they give you so much money. And yet we are going to not only make sure that they get permits, because I also found out at this meeting that the landlords are charging them $40 just to park in their parking lot. So we're going to charge them not only for the permit, but if they forget that their car is out there, if they have friends out there, if they have family who have visited, or if they do have a party. I'm sorry, I think we've forgotten what it was like to be a college student. If they have a party, then what is going to actually happen? Their car gets towed. You're targeting people. And really, you're targeting certain people, just like on Crane and Russell. There is a certain population that we're targeting. And it's really disturbing to me. So I have to say that not only will this not decrease crime, parking ban, it's actually going to increase crime. If I'm a criminal, I'm going to pick up on the fact that, you know what, there's not very many cars out here. Why am I going to park my car on the street? I'm going to park my car where there's more cars. Unless you're going to have parking police every single parking lot, I mean, it just absolutely makes no sense. And if I'm a criminal, I'm not going to have my car anywhere near where I'm going to be committing a crime. In fact, I would have my buddy way down there, and then I would text him, come get me. I'd be bolting through the dark areas. I mean, this just does not make any sense. So if it's money that we need, and we all know that is the case, I think we need to call it for what it is. But what it's going to come down to is the entire city is going to have this ordinance. It's already headed that way. At the SA meeting, we found out that parking meters are also going to be coming down the road. That was the first I've ever heard of that. This is about money. We need to stop blaming the wrong people. And then finally, I also am proposing that if this is really about crime, and yes, we do have crime, we are nowhere near UIC. We're not even close. And I also take offense to that. Not that we are not UIC, but that we're being compared to UIC. So I propose that at one point on Pleasant, over in that neighborhood, all we heard about was how horrible Pleasant was, Pleasant Street, and that entire neighborhood. And it got to a point where that's pretty much all you heard in the news that was bad. It wasn't NIU, it was Pleasant. So what did they do? You all put up, not you, because most of you weren't here, put up a police officer in the neighborhood. So I propose that if we really want to combat crime, then, and this will also be part of a budget, but you put up 2 officers on the east side of Annie Glidden, and you put up 2 officers on the west side, and you have them live there, where there is police presence. And then people will see that. And I think that the students really wouldn't mind, as long as the police officer's not knocking on everybody's door all the time. I don't think that that's the case over in Pleasant. But I really question the purpose of this parking ban. All you're going to do is cause more problems for not only students, but residents. It's already been known that, it's going to be an inconvenience, but it's going to be more of an inconvenience than you even realize.
Katie, could you wrap it up then?
And that's all I have to say.
Yeah.
I thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Christine Wang. Hi, Christine.
Good Good evening. Thank you for allowing me the time to address you today regarding Ordinance 2017-052, which would implement Phase 1 of the Safe Streets Initiative. As stated before, my name is Christine Wang. I'm currently serving as the Speaker of the Student Association Senate at NIU. And on behalf of the students and of the senators who could not be here today, save for one who is with me today, Will Seaw, I wanted to address some concerns that we had regarding the Safe Streets Initiative. So first, I wanted to give some background on the outreach that has been done regarding students. And to my understanding, the timeline regarding outreach began on November 15th with a meeting at the Student Association office in Campus Life Building 180 with a number of executive branch leaders, as well as myself and the Deputy Speaker, Brandon Loznicki. And at that meeting, the Safe Streets Initiative was first introduced to us. And a timeline for the implementation by City Council was not initially given to us, save for the fact that it was going to be implemented in August. Had we known, we would have called to action much sooner. Additionally, while the proposed time of the implementation was discussed to be taking place in fall, it was not made clear during the November 15th meeting that November 27th would be the first reading of this proposal and that December 11th was the second reading. And as such, with the information given, both Brandon and I had a lot of concerns about this proposal, and I asked the Chief of Police, Gene Lowry, to attend a Senate meeting to present the proposal in front of Senate and to answer questions that both we had and that we were sure senators would have as well. And at the meeting that Katie actually had also attended on December 3rd, Chief Lowry did attend. He answered questions about the Safe Streets Initiative. And so despite an assertion that there was student feedback, I was extremely surprised to learn that the only people in the body of 40 senators who even knew about the Safe Streets Initiative was myself and Brandon. The Student Association Senate is perhaps the most well-connected group of students on campus and represents 4 districts broken up by location and where students live, in concept much like the wards you represent today. District 1 consists of on-campus housing. District 2 consists of the area north of the residence halls and west of Annie Glidden. And District 3 consists of the Annie Glidden North neighborhood / Greek Row. District 4 consists of the commuter population. So as such, we have a large number of students in different student groups and who also live all across the city of DeKalb. So usually, if there's something going on in the city, at least a few senators will be aware of the situation. So while it has been pointed out to me that this ordinance was made public beginning November 13th, and that there were articles published in the Daily Chronicle about it, it's also unreasonable to expect most students to be aware of all city council matters and their implications, especially with the fact that Thanksgiving break was in between November 13th and November 27th. So in this case, the only senators who are aware of this ordinance were myself and the Deputy Speaker, who attended the meeting on November 15th. So for those of you who are not familiar with the structure of the Student Association, we're set up much like the federal government, where we have an executive branch, a legislative branch, and a judicial branch. While we're under the same organizational umbrella, we do operate differently from branch to branch, and that group on November 15th was comprised primarily of executive branch members from the SA who, while they are well connected, don't have the same access to the student body as Senate does. So I understand also that there are other stakeholders than just students here. Non-student residents, for example, have an equally large say, but from the perspective of the Student Association, our concerns lie primarily with ensuring our student concerns are expressed to the right people. So since that December 3rd Senate meeting, we have had 2 meetings with the Chief of Police and 1 with City Manager Anne Marie Gora. And both of those meetings proved to be very helpful in clearing up some of the questions that were raised during the Senate meeting. And although we do have some concerns, which I will address later on. There is now a clear understanding regarding the implementation of Phase 1, the purpose of the Safe Streets Initiative, and that this specific ordinance only implements Phase 1. Additionally, clear communication lines have been established between the police department and the students, so moving forward, this should hopefully not be a problem. And I want to make clear, first of all, that I'm not going to pretend to be the foremost expert on safety. No one in the student body can claim to be that. I am a huge advocate for better safety in the community and for our police department's work. And I also appreciate the hard work that the PD has done to keep our students safe, especially during the last few months where, from my understanding, each police officer pulled multiple overtime shifts. And for their work, the chief's work, and for the council's work, I am grateful, and I think I speak for the rest of the Senate and for the student body when I say that. Moving forward, however, while I understand the council's concerns and our mutual desire to keep our students safe, I am concerned with the timeline of the approval of the proposal and how it may affect the student population as a whole. So there's a few concerns, and that these are questions that should be taken seriously, and these are concerns that have been raised by students to multiple senators. So I'm going to talk about that right now. So first, the timing of these proposals.
Can you wrap it up here relatively quickly, Christine? You're at 5 minutes already. You're 2 minutes past the 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to try, but there's a lot of concerns that I have to address. First, these timings have to be carefully considered. A lot of students were not happy that the first reading took place after Thanksgiving break. Also, today is the first day of finals week. There were 18 students who were supposed to come here today. 16 of those students could not make it because of finals. They are students first, and they are senators second. Additionally, the cost of the proposed permit is another concern. While it's only $25 to each resident per year, that small amount of money does mean a great deal to these students. For example, a large number of our students are first-generation college students who don't have access to economic resources or family who could help them with monetary needs. So with paying $92 per year for a parking permit on campus, you also have to pay another $25. That's $117. And additionally, for $5 for every guest pass that they want to use. So this is a problem that can and will affect students as well as regular students.
Thank you.
Third, there's two more. Third, the issue of drunk driving is another concern. Since there's a no parking between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m., there are concerns that students who are going to a party and get more intoxicated than they intend will have to move their cars, and they're going to be moving those cars because they don't want to risk towing. So we want to make sure that all of our students are safe and that drunk driving is not an issue on campus. Finally, the concerns with outreach is something that also needs to be addressed. I think moving forward, we have addressed a few of those, but I think moving forward, we also need to continue those. So I'm going to wrap it up very quickly here by saying that there is an understanding that there's a proactive measure of the police department, but we also need to ensure that community university is kept within this process, and that if the city is adversely affected, the university will be affected, and vice versa. So I urge you, on behalf of the students of the Northern Illinois University, to take these concerns seriously and to carefully consider the impact that this ordinance have, both positively and negatively, on the students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Christine. Chief Lowry?
Thanks for all the comments from everybody, not only tonight, but I have to say that throughout this process, which has gone on for several weeks, there's been a ton of community input. Special thanks to Alderman Jacobson. There's a couple folks in the 5th Ward that I have to be honest with you have really put a lot of legwork into this. Derek Van Buren and the Haji Sheik couple, Misty and Michael. So thanks to them as well. There's been a host of other people that have provided input. So whether or not any one individual or group agrees or disagrees, the input's valuable. And it certainly has given us pause to change the ordinance, as you've seen in the ordinance you have before you tonight, from first draft to second draft. I have just a few comments in the outline and we'll move forward, but I would say in regard to Speaker of the Student Senate, Christine Wang's comment about timeline, there were additional meetings besides those she was in attendance with that involved other NIU students and NIU administrative staff. And also the timeline of this is, does this have to be approved tonight? It doesn't have to be approved tonight. We'd like to have all 4 phases of this approved before next August. So the concern about any information getting out or not getting out, I think is a little bit minimalized. I'd also say this, two-way communication, we had a big lesson learned, I think, on both sides of the street in regard to NIU and the city. And I'll speak specifically for myself. One of the first meetings we had with the NIU administrative staff also involved the Student Association president. My mistake to believe that covered everything. And I think the communication processes internally on both sides of that fence could be improved, and I think they have been or will be. And I can get a nod. Thank you, Christine, for that. So I think that will change the course of a lot of things. Let's talk about the Safe Streets Initiative. We've already briefly touched on some of the proactive measures outside of the parking enforcement component, but to address the parking enforcement component, I believe that the parking enforcement is a key issue in regarding the reduction of crime. It's not my idea. It's tried and true. It's proven. It's occurred at university communities throughout the nation. It occurs throughout the suburbs, especially the Chicagoland suburbs, in regard to parking restrictions. The most common is the citywide ban from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. in many of our suburbs. Crystal Lake being one, Hanover Park being one. There are several. I can tell you the difference in crime in those jurisdictions by comparison, and some of those jurisdictions also have colleges, is pretty remarkable. Tried and true. When you speak to Chief Phillips, the NIU police chief, he has said before you, during this process of the prior readings, that he believes in this. He's seen it in effect at his past experiences at UIC and UC, and that it is an option that works. One of the interesting things that has occurred throughout the process, though, the communication component of it is, between first reading and now, is this is truly tonight dealing with phase one. So I'm not going to go through a big slide presentation, but I'm going to try and kick you to the phase one component of this so you have something up there to reference. Phase one is a very small neighborhood that basically takes in Russell Road and Crane Drive, and the small residential areas, primarily the one, I don't even want to call them one block streets, but streets such as Moraine Terrace, Evergreen Circle, and Pheasant Run. We also went a little bit over on the backside, connecting to Normal Road through Charles, through High Terrace and Charles. And you'll see some interesting things as this whole process evolves, but to make this a little simpler, we know the fundamental components of this involve a 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. ban on parking on Russell and Crane. I'm glad that Michael Welsh came to speak tonight, because he was one of the main voices in that neighborhood for problems in the neighborhood and quality of life concerns they've had for a long time. But there's a component in regard to crime for that neighborhood that I want you to see. When people talk about the motivation for this, that it being budgetary or revenue, although I respect someone's right to speak, I strongly disagree with that. In that neighborhood, in the areas adjacent to Russell and Crane, from January 1st of this year to December 3rd, there were 3,413 calls for service. And let me back up a little bit. You're talking about an area that covers about 2 blocks one way and about 1 block the other. 3,413 calls for service. There were 66 property crimes, 73 drug crimes, 7 weapons offenses, and 22 violent crimes. That's the data. That's not speculation. Also in regard to this, besides the parking, the time frame of the parking ban, there was a no parking zone that would be impacted at all times. This also included, as a part of the parking ban, a tow zone, which has been in part addressed. So what I'd like to do is just kind of refresh our recollections in regard to some of the key misconceptions that have occurred. I think one of the biggest misconceptions that have occurred from the time of bringing phase one to the council on first reading and to now has been, I think the community by and large thought this was one giant package coming to the city council, and this was going to change the course of events citywide. That was just simply not true. It's phase one tonight, which is the subject of the second reading. The second big misconception is in regard to resident parking permits. I think, and maybe I won't even say maybe, I'll accept responsibility for this. In regard to the language concerning resident parking permits, I think it was easy to perceive that it meant that everybody had, regardless of whether they had room in their driveway or not, had to buy a parking permit. That's simply not the case. It's simply not the case. In these restricted areas, it was simply to address if folks needed additional on-street parking. Part of the rationale for that is that there have been many residences, single-family homes, that have been converted into multiple, way beyond the occupancy ordinance, concerning the amount of folks that can live in a home of that nature, which has created a tremendous amount of quality of life concerns in neighborhoods. Cars parking on lawns, loud parties that at times have gone violent, and a host of other demands for services for the police. Let's talk about how this changed from reading one to today and why community input has been so valuable. First and foremost, clarification of the permit requirements. Again, this is not everybody has to have a permit. If you require on-street parking during these hours, then you would need one. This is not like a motor vehicle registration tax, based on my aforementioned comments. There was another key component that was changed from reading one to reading two, which was the elimination of guest pass limits. There was still a guest pass permitting process with a cost, but it was limited to basically X amount. We've eliminated that limit. While there is a cost to put a permit process in effect, especially one where you have to have stickers that adhere to a vehicle, as opposed to just one that dangles on a mirror or a paper product, one of the main reasons for a guest parking permit was to eliminate folks from circumventing off-street parking. Moving on to the next category, which I believe is deeply intertwined with the guest pass permit, is temporary parking areas. As many of you know, the police department I would have to believe for decades, but for the years I've been here, and I know immediately prior to that, has had what has been called within the police department as the alibi parking process. That has been where someone would say, I'm having family over for Thanksgiving or Christmas. There's going to be a lot more cars in the street. Could you please allow that parking to occur? We have consistently honored those. And in order to reassure people, and this again came from the community, instead of relying on an informal practice, we placed the language in regard to the ordinance that is already in effect that allows us to make temporary changes for needs of that nature. That's contained in the revised ordinance. An additional one was authorized contractor parking, whether it's a contractor working on your house, mowing your yard, plowing your driveway, that kind of a situation. Again, that came from a resident who said, hey, what about this? That allowed us to put language in that facilitated that type of service being in the area without a permit. So I think there is a variety of examples of how the community has given their input and how the ordinance has evolved. This was not done in the dark. Let me review real quickly the input that we've done so far. We have had over half a dozen meetings with NIU students and staff, not always that represented in each one, but with NIU personnel and staff from the university. I have met and discussed this matter on more than one occasion with the NIU police chief. In the neighborhood impacted and in the green area depicted on the map, we had 4 police officers conduct a door-to-door canvass addressing each and every home. Now, granted, we didn't get them all, but the numbers went something like this. There are 38 homes in the affected area, 4 of which are vacant. There were 16 no responses at the door, and we conducted this during the daytime, so that's understandable. But there were actually 18 residences where we got voice back, or we got someone saying, hey, input, I should say, here's our concerns, or here's what we have to say. If we narrow it down to deducting the 4 vacant homes and say that there were 34 available to be polled, 18 out of the 34 respondents would be, the 18 respondents out of 34 total potential folks or residents being reached, that's about 52%. 13 of the 18 spoke strongly in favor. That's about 72%, supporting the ordinance as stated with parking permits. 4 of the 18 were indifferent. If you add those two together, that's 94% either favored or didn't have a concern one way or the other. 1 out of 18 opposed it. And I know the smaller you get on numbers, the more skewed the data is, and that's about 6%. There were a number of phone calls by myself and others to address this matter, and a number of emails. We also went door to door and met with the faith-based community in the area. We found out a lot of things. We found out that every church in the neighborhood that's going to be impacted by Phase 1 through Phase 4, except for one, either allows parking or charges for parking in their parking lots. That's pretty impressive, because that's a whole lot of parking lots that are available for people to use, especially when we look at the balance between convenience and safety. The police department also did nighttime surveys of the affected parking lots, and in none of those, whether it was west of Annie Glidden or in Phase 1, were the parking lots filled. In this particular area, the 2 major complexes, University Plaza and University Village, have never had a full lot during any of our surveys. And they are also in compliance with the UDO. So there is plenty of parking available. Community stakeholders, like the Park District, Michael Welsh spoke well of it. You know what? We were happy that they changed the hours from basically sunrise to sunset in Welsh Park. Very happy. So a big shout out of thanks to that. But we've really tried to do our best to get input. We certainly know that this is a big change. But I can tell you that if you go down to Champaign-Urbana and you go to the University of Illinois and you try to park on or near Greek Row, it's not going to happen. They allow parking, usually out by the sports complex, and folks are responsible for shuttling their guests to and from. One thing we found out during this process with NIU that I was unaware of, and I think the students were as well, was that NIU provides, north of the Convocation Center, free parking to students who have a parking permit that they've already paid for, and at times does provide shuttle service. Parking is available. In regard to transportation options, that's an ongoing dialogue between the city and the university, not only in regard to the buses, the big buses, but also in regard to the Husky Safe Line. But I would say this to you, and although I'm not out on that street weekly, the times I've been out and I've observed it personally, and I can say anecdotally from every officer in our department, if we see a person walking after 2 a.m. in this area and they are walking alone, we generally ask them if they want to ride because we know the potential threat in this area. That's not a revenue, that's a crime problem. That's a public safety component. In closing, to give this back to the council for further questions or discussion, I would simply say this. We're here, or I'm here to answer any questions you have. I firmly believe this is a positive step. I do think it's going to take time to adjust. I think this does create some inconveniences, but when I look at crime, public safety, quality of life, and it's just not the students, it's the other non-student residents, but everyone is a stakeholder in this. If I have to weigh the balance of someone being robbed, shot, battered, in a situation where we could have facilitated a better police response by having the streets clear from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. or 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. in Phase 1. And that's the only phase that has that much of a restriction. I would choose and err on the side of safety and quality of life. And I'll answer any questions you have.
Gene, we appreciate your presentation, your hard work at putting this together. We really appreciate the input that we've had tonight and the number of phone calls and emails that I'm sure all of us have received. I'd like to open it up now to council discussion and questions. Alderman Noriko.
Chief, I appreciate, as the mayor said, your efforts at being proactive in addressing the safety concerns in that area. The one question I have is the $25 rate for the parking permit. How is that figure arrived at?
Well, what we did was we took a look at what some of the rental properties were charging for parking, which seems to run, and maybe Alderman Jacobson could chime in on this as well, which seems to run between $40 and $50. And then we looked at what NIU was charging. And then we looked back at, which is basically, on the low end, a little over $100 annually, and on the high end, if you have a special reserve spot, over $800 per spot per year. And that's a rarity. That's primarily that's not a student-oriented parking fee or where a student would typically apply for something like that. And we looked at why students park in certain areas that have created some crime and quality of life concerns, and why others coming into the community would do the same. So when we evaluated that, I can understand to some degree why at certain times students park in certain areas to avoid paying a parking permit fee. I get that. I get that. However, it's extremely difficult for the police to be able to go into a neighborhood, and the classic example is students don't change their license plate registration address when they come to go to the university. So it's impossible for the police to determine if a car parked on the street without a permit belongs to someone that lives in the area. The same would go for even if it had a university parking permit. Many folks live out of town and have university parking permits. So we looked at the balance between $40 and the low end of the NIU permits and said, okay, we've got to be as fair as possible. We also looked and evaluated what city stickers in many of the suburbs cost, almost all of which are way above $25. And we thought that fee would be enough of a discouragement for people to violate the no parking area.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Jacobson.
I, as Gene mentioned, have met with him a couple times on this issue, and I share some of the concerns the students have. Obviously, tonight we're dealing with Phase 1, and I think it's important to share, at least from my perspective, being effectively on the border or part of the First Ward, in meeting with the neighborhoods and the streets in this phase at the very least. I think that the comments we've gotten were asking for this. I know Bill and I were at several of the meetings that Mike Welch facilitated through the neighborhood group there and through some of the planning stages of that neighborhood group. And it was universal that this is what they were asking for. This wasn't something that we're promulgating on them. For those streets especially, they were asking for us to look into some of the quality of life issues being caused by open Wild West parking on that street. And I think this addresses that, and I think it meets the concern that they asked us to look into. So in terms of Phase 1, what we're talking about tonight, I haven't heard any issues with it directly, but for the fact of people that don't live in the neighborhood. Some of the most outspoken people involved in the few communications I've gotten don't live in the neighborhood and don't park in the neighborhood and really have nothing to do with the neighborhood. So while I'm cognizant that there are still some issues in some of the other phases that Gene and I have been discussing and have been working on to try to make sure that the student needs, especially on those buildings that don't have the appropriate parking in the neighborhood to meet the demand for their residents are addressed and are given some opportunity to park. Again, going back to the cost of the $25, the realization that it's a profit generator, I think, is somewhat of a fallacy. The reality that someone's going to have to sit and issue these permits and get the data of what building they're in, to do some of the checking, to make sure that they're legitimate and all those things, and being cognizant that most of our staff is $25 to $35 an hour minimum. Even if they're putting a half hour into it, we're making a whopping total of $10 per permit minus the permit cost, which as a landlord, I could tell you runs anywhere between $3 and $12. So the windfall of money we're going to see in this thing, I think, is going to be in the maybe 3 figures, possibly 4 if we're lucky, which again won't account for the staff time that's been put in to develop this process, to institute this process, to ensure that we are reaching out to the students and getting the student and resident input. We won't nearly cover those costs, not in the first year, not in the second year, probably not even until year 5 or 10 or later. In the context of some of the student questions and timeline issues, I think Jean has made it pretty clear. I'm sure Anne Marie would follow in that lead, and I certainly would, in saying if you have questions or concerns. The first ward is generally a very student-heavy neighborhood. The 7th ward is very generally student-heavy neighborhood. We're willing to meet and discuss those concerns and try to come to some rectification. I don't think anyone is trying to hide anything. Again, this is going to be a multi-month process. I appreciate the fact that the students are here tonight. I think it gives us another opportunity to invite them into that conversation, whether it's one-on-one, whether it's if they want to have it as a group, whether they feel that the police chief is the best route, or the city manager is the best route, or their alderman is the best route. All of us are ready, willing, and able to facilitate that conversation and want to have those conversations. So at least on behalf of me, and I see the city manager nodding, and probably the police chief, and I would guess Tony, please call us, email us, reach out to us. I've met the speaker several times. I know the deputy speaker pretty well. He is one of the undergraduates of my fraternity chapter here on campus. So access should be pretty easy, at least to me. If you feel you need access to any of the others, please reach out to me and I'll plug you into them.
I'll echo what Chief Lowry said too. Dave, I appreciate all the time you've spent on this, not only with the chief, but with others in your area up there in the 1st ward. Alderman Fagan, you're good, okay? Alderman Fanouken.
Well, you know, particularly over the last couple of years for the residents of single-family homes on Pheasant Run, Evergreen Circle, Marine Terrace, this is something they certainly have asked Dave and I about for several years, and I think as we move forward, will certainly impact their life, make it a little bit better for them on those particular streets, along with the restrictions of the parking on Russell and Crane at specific hours will help, I think, some of the issues at Welch Park also. Going forward, again, parts of the area that, as we move forward with the other phases are in Ward 2, again, reach out to me. And again, I'll say not just Dave or the city manager or the mayor, but probably any of the 8 of us up here will be willing to talk to you about it and go from there. Thank you.
Alderman Faber.
Yeah, I would just echo a lot of the comments that have already been said. But Chief, you've done a good job with this. Obviously, as we go forward, communication in the 21st century is always a challenge. There's so many multiple outlets to communicate across, and personally, I don't hardly ever read the newspaper. So it's one of those that an advertisement placed in the newspaper wouldn't reach me, but there's others that do consistently read the paper. So, you know, I think we take some lessons learned going forward from that, and you know, reaching out to the other parties as well. And certainly Phase 2 and Phase 3, those are going to impact Ward 7 much more than the current. Thank you.
And Mayor, I just had a couple more comments.
Yes.
If the council was finished, there's so many good things that have come about as a result of the interaction with the community in regard to this. For example, in talking to students, you know, I wasn't aware that, I was aware that you could rent space on the NIU bus line on the outside, which is, you know, kind of cost prohibitive for most of our initiatives. But we can potentially get free space to post flyers inside the buses. So that was something new, and I've been here almost 6 years, I didn't realize that, which is a huge benefit. To touch on Alderman Jacobson's comments again, we are offering and already planning on a meeting for the North Fifth Ward. We're going to have a Fifth Ward meeting this week, which may have some comments in regard to that, or coming up Wednesday. And we also plan a separate parking Phase 2 meeting for community members in regard to that. We hope students are attracted to that as well. We'll get that word out on that. Probably going to come after the holidays, the way the holidays are getting closer to us. One more comment in regard to crime. You know, the revenue comparison and budget demands to crime, you know what kicked this off for us? And I'm going to be real honest with you. You know, we do have our crime concerns, and you can see the numbers just for that small neighborhood. But on Halloween, we had another shooting. Since those multiple shootings during the course of this year, we've arrested 14 people, primarily gang members who have no, as one speaker said, you know, it's not the students that are typically the problems, it's the students that are typically the victims. But that's why we decided as a city, in a variety of disciplines, from a variety of approaches, we have to do something. We don't have any more police officers. We don't have a host of resources to go to. We have what we have, and we have to do the best we can with that. And lastly, and I think this is the most important component of this, even if this is approved in second reading, implementation will not be immediate. We have signage to deal with. We have some time to pass, but we've already committed to the community to give a 2-week grace period that we can also use as giving the community additional notice for those who choose not to read the newspaper or not to attend a meeting or not to do anything else. If their car is parked illegally during this 2-week grace period, we'll placard it with an information bulletin and let it go. So that will also give us the period of time to adjust. And with that, I have no further comments.
Any further comments from council? Dean?
Mayor, just to confirm that our motion, as was outlined in the staff memo, we had some proposed revisions that the chief went through that are based on community feedback. We wanted to confirm that the motion and second tonight were to approve the amended version that's recommended in the agenda packet.
You comfortable with that?
Yes.
I can't recall who made that motion. Basically, we're approving the ordinance implementing Phase 1 with the changes as recommended. Yes, okay. Roll call.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbeck?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you, Council.
Motion passes. Thank you, Jane, and thank you, everyone, for speaking to this ordinance, which we have passed tonight. Number 8 on the agenda tonight, ordinance 2017-055, amending Chapter 38, intoxicating liquors, Section 38.06, insurance. This is first reading, and Dean, you're going to speak to this item?
Yes, Mayor.
Please.
We currently have within the city code a provision that addresses liquor licensees and requires them to maintain certain minimum insurance. Under Illinois state law, a liquor licensee is required to maintain dram shop insurance, which is essentially insurance that covers the liability associated with the pouring and sale of alcoholic beverages. Under our city code, we require licensees currently to name the city of DeKalb as additional primary insured on their comprehensive general liability insurance policy and also on their dram shop insurance policy. What that essentially means is if there's a liability claim arising out of the actions of a liquor licensee, and if the city were sued as a result of that action, that we would go and claim that their insurance is first in line, that their insurance is primary. It insures any claims even against the city that arise out of the actions of that licensee. In discussions with local businesses, the process of naming a party as just additional insured on your comprehensive general liability insurance doesn't typically incur an extra cost for businesses. Adding that you're additional primary insured and including something called a waiver of subrogation, that's a waiver of the insurance company's rights to pursue claims against other parties to try and get money they pay out back. Adding those two provisions in does increase the cost for licensees. And on average, their cost for doing so, depending on the size of the establishment, ranges from $200 to up to close to $1,000 a year, additional costs for our liquor licensees. It was raised with the city as to whether the city would be willing to entertain changes to that, and so we've gone back and evaluated our current provisions. We still strongly recommend keeping the requirement of naming the city as an additional insured on comprehensive general liability insurance. Also, if anytime we have a licensee that is engaged in licensed conduct on city property, whether that be a special event on city property or whether that be some of our downtown sidewalk leases that regularly pour alcoholic beverages on sidewalk areas that they lease from the city, we'd still recommend having the additional primary insured, waiver of subrogation, and coverage on the dram shop insurance to protect the city's interests in that circumstance. Short of that, though, as we weighed the potential benefit from being named as additional primary insured without right of subrogation versus just being named as additional insured, and we compared that to the cost that's being incurred by our licensees, we felt that it was a fair policy question for the council as to whether that cost benefit works out. So if we take the tens of licensees that we have in the city and multiply that by several hundred up to $1,000 a piece, and we compare that against the additional primary insured status, which in the 5 years that this code has been in place, the city has threatened to invoke in one circumstance, but has not had to fully invoke. We wanted to present this to the council for your consideration and evaluation as to whether this is something that you'd feel comfortable lessening the standards. Again, we would still maintain additional insured status, so there is some benefit conferred. If there's conduct of a liquor licensees that would create some liability for the city, we would just be reducing the level of that coverage, that it would likely not be primary, it would be supplemental to our existing coverage.
I failed to entertain a motion on this ordinance.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Now, further discussion. Alderman Fagan.
I'm pretty familiar with this, and everything Attorney Frieders is talking about is correct. You know, we're talking about two different policies. We're talking about one liquor liability policy where the two people are going to be brought in as the liquor establishment and the property owner, and that's where Attorney Frieders is saying we have to keep that primary non-contributory if someone was dispensing alcohol on city property, i.e. Corn Fest, whatever. The other problem that you run into when you come into primary non-contributory and the waiver of subrogation is some companies won't do this. Where I know one of the big writers of liquor is Lloyd's of London, and they will not allow this, where they actually not only had to incur additional costs, but they've also had to change insurance carriers. So I really like this, and we're trying to be a little more business friendly here, you know, and that's what we're trying to get at.
So you're in that business and you're comfortable with this?
I am. I'm very comfortable with it.
Okay. Alderman Faber?
So I'm going to ask you to speculate, which is always bad. In the example that you said, we've threatened in the past. If we hadn't threatened to use that portion, potentially what would be the city's liability, hypothetically, or speculating?
So in that circumstance, what we would still do is we would still send a tender letter and we would say, we're named as additional insured on your insurance policy, and we believe that you have an obligation to carry this defense and defend the city. And in that circumstance, our insurance company and their insurance company would essentially be arguing about who has responsibility for our costs or whatever costs the city incurred. If it got to a state where we were exceeding the $10 million or $11 million of coverage that the city has on comprehensive general liability, or depending on what line of coverage we're falling into, then if we exceeded our coverage, then that coverage would be supplemental. If we didn't exceed it, we'd be in a coverage dispute about who had primary responsibility. So we still retain the ability to, in litigation, claim that coverage, demand insurance, send a tender letter, invoke that obligation, and the customary response, speculating, would likely be that our insurance and their insurance would be coordinating the defense in some aspect, and they would either deny coverage or defend under reservation of rights, or try to limit their exposure. From a practical perspective, we carry enough insurance on the city's side to protect against any foreseeable claim that we've been able to identify coming out of this type of liability, which is one of the reasons that we're more comfortable. I mean, one of our critical roles as attorneys is identifying potential risks, mitigating potential risks. This is a risk that is mitigated more if we're additional primary insured, without a doubt. But that risk, given our underlying insurance coverage, is so remote that I'm very comfortable with the recommendation of changing the requirements here. I should also note, Mayor, and I failed to note before, we've been working with the Park District on their insurance coverage, and we've been trying to coordinate some changes in the code with them, and they were working through some changes with their Risk Management Association. And we wanted to not make changes in our code that were going to cause problems for them. This was originally intended to come to council at the first meeting in November, but we've pushed it back as we've been waiting to see what their outcome was. So it is here tonight. If the council is comfortable with it, I would request a waiver of second reading, simply so that we can get word out to our licensees who are on a calendar year renewal, so they don't incur that cost at the start of 2018. But again, that's at the council's preference.
Thanks.
Okay, any further discussion on this? Alderman Favor?
Can I make a motion to waive second reading as?
Who made the original motion?
I did vote first.
Do we have to vote first?
We have to vote first.
We have a motion on the floor
Okay,
right now.
why don't we vote on the first
Okay.
reading, and then we can come back. Any further discussion on the first reading? Roll call.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbeck?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Alderman Favor, do you have a motion?
I would make a motion to waive second reading and approve.
I second that.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Verbeck?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
That ordinance is approved. Moving along on the agenda, number 9, Resolution 2017-139, authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with DeKalb Township Road District for snow plowing and de-icing of certain roadways. Our Public Works Director, Tim Holdeman, will speak to this item. Tim?
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Public Works staff is requesting authorization of an intergovernmental agreement with DeKalb County Township Road District for snow plowing and de-icing certain roadways. This is the renewal of the intergovernmental agreement that expired May 1st, 2017, and covered the snow season 2016-2017. There are some minor modifications to the agreement, and I will go over those in a minute. Prior to the written agreement that was passed last year, this was an unwritten agreement, so it has been a practice for a number of years. The agreement promotes operational efficiencies between the township and the city, wherein the city, when the city crosses a township road that's a small segment of the road, they leave the snow plow down. and the township the same for the city. And then we also share responsibility on some roads, including Fairview, portions of Gurler, and South Peace. The modification that exists in the current IGA for your consideration is that the township no longer plows Bethany between Sangamon and Annie-Glidden North. That is an area that's city responsible for, and it's become a burden for the township to do that. And so, and we can run our plows on out to Annie-Glidden Road without any problem. So we're going to make that change this year. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
First of all, motion to approve this intergovernmental agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Now we'll open for the discussion. Any questions of Tim?
I'm sorry, who seconded?
I did.
Thanks.
Alderman Fagan. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson? Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
7 yes.
That resolution is passed. Thank you, Tim. Item number 10, Resolution 2017-140, authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with DeKalb County dictating that the funds for the 2017 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant Program in the amount of $16,014 be awarded solely to the city of DeKalb. Motion?
So moved.
Second?
Been moved and seconded, and Gene Lowry is going to speak to this item. Chief?
Thank you. The 2017 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistant Grant is coming before you again. This intergovernmental agreement has been entertained in the past. This is going on our third or fourth year of acquiring this grant. It's a grant that allows us to, it is a non-matching grant, so there are no city funds that have to go towards this grant. It's a grant for $16,000.14. That number is figured out. It's not randomly picked out. It's figured out actually based on the number of arrests and such that we do have. The grant submission requires an intergovernmental agreement between us and the county because both the county and the city are eligible for this. And by the grace of the county, they have said they do not have an interest in this grant and that we could apply for the entire amount. What this grant is typically used for and what we would use it for is to purchase equipment that would help us to identify, investigate, and prosecute those who are involved in weapons-related offenses, violent crimes, and gang-related crimes in our community. Other than that, it's one of the best benefits we have because, as you know, we've just gone through a pretty laborious budget process, and we don't always get the things we want or need. And this is one of the ways that we can get some of the things we need. Thank you.
Thank you, Gene. Any questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Jacobson? Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
7 yes.
Thank you, Jane. Number 11, Resolution 2017-141, authorizing a feasibility study and report with respect to the designation of a certain area as a tax increment financing redevelopment project area. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Jason Mitchnick is going to speak to this, our Community Development Director.
That's actually Joe.
Well, actually, our Economic Development Planner.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me.
Lost your title.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I'd like to turn the clocks back a little bit and take you back to September 19th when we had a special committee of the whole to discuss our two tax increment financing districts that are set to expire in the coming years. During that meeting, staff presented Council with revenue and expense projections and an estimated fund balance that we have for the remaining years of those two TIF districts, and also presented 3 separate options to Council for consideration. One of those, the first option was to take the existing projects that staff has identified and prioritize those and decide how the existing balance could be spent towards those projects. The second option was to look at existing financial policies and make potential changes to increase the available funds that could go towards projects. And the third option was to investigate the creation of a new TIF district in the downtown. At council's recommendation, the options were taken to commissions for discussion. So on October 6th, the option 3, which was the creation of the new downtown TIF district, was taken to the city's Economic Development Commission. And then on October 17th, it was taken to the Finance Advisory Committee. And they discussed both option 2, which was the changes to financial policies, as well as the creation of the new TIF district. The Economic Development Commission discussed the new TIF district and was in support of moving forward with investigating whether or not that would be eligible. The FAC discussed both options, as I mentioned. They did not give a positive recommendation for making any changes to our existing financial policies to increase the availability of funding, but they did recommend moving forward with investigating the creation and eligibility of the new TIF district. So based on the support from the Economic Development Commission and the Finance Advisory Committee, staff approached several firms in the region that are known to be experts in the creation of TIF districts. The proposals were based on the boundary that was included in your packet as Exhibit 2, which was slightly different from the proposed boundary that was included in the September 19th Committee of the Whole, with the exclusion of the Elwood Historic Neighborhood being the change between those two. Based on conversations with the TIF experts, the inclusion of the Elwood Historic Neighborhood would have made the qualification or the eligibility study portion of that substantially more difficult because of, one, the number of parcels that are included in that area, but two, that it is a residential area. There's different criteria and eligibility and regulations per state statute for residential properties in a TIF. Also, in past conversations that the city has had with other taxing districts, we have said that any new TIF districts that we investigate or create would have a significantly reduced footprint. And one of the questions that the school district has had in the past is, or a request is to reduce the amount of residential properties in TIF districts. So we looked at the proposed boundary that was in Exhibit 2, really looks at highlighting the commercial properties that are assessed currently at less than they were at the base year of the central area TIF, which is 30 years ago. So based on the discussions with those TIF consultants, we had 3 proposals that were returned back to us with similar scope of service. Kane McKenna, PGAV, and SB Friedman, with SB Friedman being the lowest cost proposal at roughly $43,000. Staff will be assisting in some of the research and data collection in an effort to lower the cost of the project as a whole, and with SB Friedman still acting as an advisor to make sure that we're checking all the boxes and requirements that we would throughout the designation process. The next step, if council does approve the resolution tonight, would be to conduct the eligibility study, which looks at the but-for argument for creation of a new TIF district. A TIF district has to meet a specific set of criteria outlined per Illinois state statute, which they would look at the properties in the whole and decide whether or not the proposed district does meet that criteria. That takes approximately 2 months, so if we were to move forward, the finding of the eligibility study would be presented to council at a future date in approximately 2 months, which I know we are planning on having a TIF follow-up conversation at a committee of the whole on January 22nd, and our hope is that we would have the results of the eligibility study available at that date or shortly thereafter. If the area is found to qualify and council chooses to move forward at that point, the next step would be to create what's called a redevelopment plan for the project area, and then also analyze the economic feasibility of such a plan. So they will look at what projects we have identified in that project area and the total cost of those projects, and then do some revenue projections and how much increment would be generated from those projects and whether or not that it could actually pay for the redevelopment plan. Another portion of that would be to conduct a housing impact study due to the total number of residential properties in the proposed boundary, as well as the potential for displacement of 10 or more existing residential units. Housing impact study is required per state statute, so they would also conduct that. There's also a series of public notices and meetings such as the Joint Review Board that would also be required. So the resolution for you tonight, for your consideration, does two things. One, it approves the professional service agreement with SB Friedman to conduct the eligibility and take us through the designation process. And it also, I'm going to ask Attorney Frieder to correct me if I say this incorrectly, but it sets our intent for the creation of the TIF district and also sets a start date for eligible expenses. So moving down, if we do designate this TIF district, the study portion of this could actually be charged back to that new TIF district by setting the date with the resolution this evening. And with that, I would entertain any questions.
Before we open it up to the council, there is one speaker, Kay Shelton, once again, who'd like to speak to TIF.
Oh, I'll save you $43,000. The laws regarding TIF in the state of Illinois are so loosey-goosey that the people who bought the Willis Tower, they originally said, we can designate the Sears Tower in the Loop as blighted, and they used TIF money to pay for the costs in changing the name for the Sears Tower to Willis. That's a company that didn't need tax dollars to do that, but that was legal. This is legal to do it that way. So the Chicago Public Schools, they're always crying about not having enough money. Well, TIF money is property tax dollars. So in order to create a pool of money so you can invest it, you have set aside a portion of the property taxes that would normally go to other things. Number one is the schools, and then that's used to invest in projects that would not exist but for TIF. Well, TIF's really easy to say, but for TIF, this project wouldn't exist. Case example is the redevelopment of the Toyota. Toyota told the dealer, hey, you need to redo your dealership, and they came to the city and said, hey, we wouldn't do this project but for TIF. Well, again, this is another group of people that didn't need tax dollars. So it's really easy to have a TIF district. You don't even have to ask permission from the schools to create one, and that's according to Illinois state law. Really easy to do this. It's paint by number. I am glad, though, that you are listening to the schools, because the schools are really impacted by this. And by taking money away from the schools and creating an investment pool, you really should look at your return on the investment. And I'm still waiting to see what the return on the investment is on that skating rink that doesn't exist. That was paid for with TIF dollars.
Thank you, Kay. Now, let's open it up to any discussion or questions from City Council. Prior to that, Dean, you wanted to say something?
I just want to clarify Jason's very good presentation there. This establishes an eligibility date for expenses that could be included in a TIF if the council later determines to establish one. This does not commit the council to establishing a TIF. Jason indicated this was our intent to create a TIF. It is not something that in any way binds the council to future action. What it does say is, if you take this action, and if you later determine that we are eligible to create a TIF and that the council, by a later vote, wishes to create a TIF, these expenses can be included within that TIF district. They could be reimbursed out of that future TIF district. So again, it is not a binding action that obligates the city at any point in time that you have to create a TIF district or not.
Thank you. Alderman Noriko.
Did Alderman Faber raise his hand before me?
I did, but go ahead.
Oh, okay. Jason, the 42,000, I think you said, was the amount. Is that broken out into different phases, or is it, so in other words, if after 20,000 has been expended, it's clear that it isn't feasible for one reason or another, we aren't obligated to pay the whole amount?
That's correct. I believe the estimated cost was included in Exhibit B of the agreement. I believe the cost of just the eligibility portion is about $18,500 off the top of my head. So if we get to that point in council, we either find that the TIF district is, one, not eligible, or based on the recommendation of the consultant that the boundary would need to be significantly modified and reduced, and that has any impact on our desired vision for the downtown and our redevelopment plan, and council chooses not to move forward, then we would only have be responsible for that cost of that eligibility study.
Okay, thank you.
Matter of fact, I think that step-up agreement is in the packet that we were provided. Alderman Verbeek.
What was the notion or thoughts of including the properties west of the river along West Lincoln Highway, largely single-family homes, couple of duplexes, I think there's a 4-unit, and then the police station? Any comments?
Sure. So during the Economic Development Commission over the past year, they worked on the implementation strategy for the strategic plan, and they identified one of their top priorities is in terms of an economic development project is creating that connection between campus and the downtown. They talked about the complete streets of Lincoln Highway, investigating either a reduction of lanes, the introduction of bike, any type of infrastructure investment, and then also to leave the city open to potential redevelopment of that area, creating an actual full commercial corridor between the downtown to the businesses on West Lincoln Highway. It was just really to give ourselves flexibility, and then also potential future addition of the police department.
But largely it's residential along.
Correct. At this time it is, yes.
Okay. Also, there's a couple of lots on, it appears, West Locust Street, standing out on their own. Does that simply cover the back driveway of the bank? Is that what?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
That covers what?
The back driveway of the bank.
Oh, okay.
Kind of the 2 lots standing out on their own on Locust Street.
And that was included in there just to have contiguity of the actual proposed district, and that could be pulled out based on the consultant's recommendation if that would impact the eligibility.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Roll call.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbeck,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
Resolution passes. Item number 12, omnibus approval of Resolution 2017-142, authorizing the appropriation of motor fuel tax funds for Phase 3 construction engineering services in an amount not to exceed $140,000. And Resolution 2017-143, approving an engineering services agreement with WBK Engineering LLC for Phase 3 construction engineering in an amount not to exceed $140,000. Motion.
So moved.
Second?
I understand we have a number of folks who are going to speak to this. Patrick?
Thank you, Mayor.
Sure.
Tonight I bring forth a resolution for omnibus approval, approving the appropriation of $140,000 in motor fuel tax funds, and the second part to that, approving a Phase 3 construction engineering services agreement with WBK in an amount not to exceed that $140K. The combination of these 2 items allow us to coincide our project with the Illinois Tollways plans to resurface the Annie Glidden I-88 interchange. IDOT is requiring us to have this this agreement in place because it will allow us to get on the April 2018 letting. For allowing us to get on that letting will allow us to take advantage of quantity pricing, eliminate the potential to disturb new pavement, and most importantly, eliminate burdening motorists with consecutive years of construction. So passing both of these will allow us to coordinate with Tollway and IDOT to get our projects done back to back. If you guys have any questions, we have acting engineer Greg Chismark, and Tim is here.
All right. So Greg and Tim are here if you need them, right?
If I do, they're my backup.
Any comments or questions on this omnibus approval of this resolution? Did we have a motion on that?
Yeah, we did.
We did, okay. Roll call.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbeck,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
Resolution passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, that's through 12 items. Item H, new or unfinished business. Is there any new or unfinished business that we need to take care of? We move on then to communications. Alderman Jacobson.
Happy holidays all. I will happily see you all next year after getting through this budget process. Obviously, over break here very shortly, there will be a significantly less student population, especially in the Greek Row and surrounding neighborhoods. If you are still here, please be cognizant both of some of the traffic in the neighborhood and those coming in and out of your building and or your neighbors' buildings. If you see anything suspicious, obviously without so many residents around, it's the time that things do happen. Please reach out to the police department and report anything you see. Happy holidays, Happy New Year.
Thank you, David. Alderman Fanouken.
Just a couple of quick comments. NAU graduation is this coming weekend. I want to congratulate those who are completing degrees and moving on with their lives. And so obviously this weekend there'll be an influx of people coming for graduation, and over this part of the week there'll be people who are going home for the holidays, so there'll be extra traffic. And then also congratulations to the Huskies on landing in the Quick Lane Bowl.
Alderman Markwart.
To be honest, no, I have no report. I composed the whole report, and I'm going to not give it.
You going to file that appropriately? Or?
I'm going to file that appropriately. It was venting on various things as we come through this year. And so I'm going to go with that I vented it to the dog on my walk.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Fagan.
I'd like to thank everybody to get through the budget process. I wish we could have gotten more things for more departments. I really do apologize on that, but we can only work with so much. I do want to thank everyone for working, especially my first budget. I can honestly say it was a lot of fun.
Are you delusional?
But I just want to wish everybody happy holidays and a safe holiday. Thank you.
Alderman Noriko.
First of all, as Chief Lowry mentioned, there will be a Ward 5 meeting on Wednesday, the 13th at 5 p.m. The police station is graciously hosting it in their community meeting room. And I hope individuals both from Ward 5 and other wards, if you're so interested, do come. It's an opportunity to get questions answered, provide feedback on the parking proposal, and also other issues. I, too, have a few comments about the budget process and recent meetings. It's been long and challenging and bloody at times, contentious, not always respectful on either sides of the dais. I would expect and hope that going forward, we are able to work together and work on issues addressing the city. I hope everyone has a relaxing, as much as possible, holiday season, and comes back re-energized to work for the city of DeKalb.
Thank you, Kate. Kate, Alderman Verbeek, please.
Happy birthday, Jennifer, and happy holidays, everyone.
Alderman Favor.
So I just shout kudos to the Egyptian Theater for putting on the It's a Wonderful Life. Interesting to see the movie in its original format on film. And my understanding is it was over a decade since they've used their projectors, and they spent the time to put them in place. There were a lot of people downtown last night. Several people went out to dinner afterward, myself included, so I thought that was great. Thank you.
It was about 1 year ago today that my wife and I spent 2 long weekends in deciding whether or not I was going to throw my hat into the ring for the mayorship of this fine community. Last April, the residents of DeKalb were kind enough to vote me in as your mayor. I took office in May and have had the opportunity over the last several months to work with this group of 7 aldermen, all of whom have the city of DeKalb first and foremost in their hearts. I would especially thank the 5 members of the council who were returning and have helped me so much. Alderman Jacobson, Alderman Fanouken, Alderman Marquardt, Alderman Norrico, and Alderman Favor. We've been very fortunate to have 2 new aldermen, 2 fine young guys who really have worked so hard, Pat Fagan and Mike Verbeek. After I was fortunate enough to win in April, and prior to assuming office in May, I met with each and every one of these folks individually. At that time, we talked about a myriad of things. Their vision for this community, their hopes for this community, their thoughts of what we needed to do to make this a much better community. But I also challenged them to, by the end of the year, fill out a report card in their minds about the performance of this mayor. Dave knows, as he so graciously sat in this chair last week, that the person who sits in this chair does indeed have a different role in many ways than the alderman representing the fine folks in the 7 wards of DeKalb. So between now and the end of the year, I once again will meet with each of these folks individually, ask them for that report card, and going forward into the new year, look for their vision, their thoughts, and how we, as Kate alluded to, can work more closely together. I think we've got a great team here. I look forward to working with all of you in 2018. Having said that, I would also challenge anyone still listening tonight that from the public's point of view, I have had so many good folks who have stepped up and said, we want to help. And some of those helpful comments were constructively against what perhaps I was thinking at the time. But believe me, I really appreciate those comments, and so I would hope the residents of DeKalb, if they feel inclined to do so, would reach out to me and also give me their report card on my performance during this first year, and perhaps to extend that for this council, with whom I've gained a great deal of confidence and I look forward to working with in 2018. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for what you've done for this community over my short tenure as your mayor. I look forward to continuing to work with you in 2018. Having said that,
Jerry,
let's-
can we back up for a minute, if I may?
Sure.
I'd like to congratulate the mother of the bride down there. Kate's daughter is getting married shortly, and I just wanted to wish her and her family well.
Thank you so very much. I'm sure Jennifer and Christopher will appreciate it, and the bonus is I'm gaining that grandson, and so, actually, he's the funnest one in the family.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go down the row here. Sue Herman, our city clerk, any report?
Just want to say happy holidays to everybody here, obviously, and then everybody in the community, too. And I echo Alderman Noriko's earlier comment, and I hope you guys all have an awesome holiday break, and then we can all come back and be ready to serve the city.
Attorney Frieders.
Thank you, Mayor. The Chronicle recently ran a story regarding some of the efforts that the city is undertaking to address challenging properties within the community, and in particular, some of the rental properties that we're focusing on in great measure. In response to that, there were some comments from members of the public, some of whom indicated that they lived in some of the affected properties or in other nearby properties, and they had concerns with their buildings. And so we wanted to make sure any member of the public understands if you have a concern about the condition of a property you're living in, please feel free to contact the city. You can call the City Hall. 815-748-2000 is the general number. We will get you to the department staff that can help. We have staff that will come out and look at your apartment, address the concerns with you, work proactively with you and building management to ensure that those concerns are remediated, and make sure everyone in the community has a safe environment to live in. So if you have a concern about your building, please let us know. We don't have a way of knowing what's going on inside apartments until people call and say, I have a problem, I need your help. Second, we want to give you an update. Early in 2018, we will be bringing back to you some options for addressing the Portanos property. We're currently identifying state-funded grants that do have funding, that look like they will have funding in the cycle for 2018, and a process for moving that property forward. We're also looking at some other environmentally contaminated property in the city that is set stagnant for a number of years, and identifying other grant opportunities for trying to remediate some of that and return it back to productive use. Third, as we get to the end of 2018, the council has set some very clear direction for a number of projects that you want to see going forward and some that you don't. And we have some really exciting opportunities that we can all be thankful for as we go into the new year. With Cornerstone will be coming online, Plaza DeKalb will be coming online. I'm probably stealing Joe Allen's thunder, but the Sundog Building is going to be gaining its certificate of occupancy very shortly here and have their first public event there in the very near future. And we have more opportunities to do other great projects with this council's direction, which we really appreciate. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
City Manager Anne Marie Gora.
Thank you, Mayor. The main thing I want to communicate and say, with this being the last meeting of the year, is to thank the city employees who have done tremendous service this year. And as we are about to go into the holidays, whether it's various holidays in the new year, that knowing that many of our employees will be spending time away from their families protecting this community, whether it's our police officers, our firefighters, our telecommunicators, whether it's our public works employees who are going to be going through snow removal down your street, removing snow and ice in the coming month before the next meeting. Just want to say to the entire organization for all the service that they have made to this community in the past year, on behalf of the executive team, to thank them greatly, and wish all of you happy holidays. Thank you.
Thank you. Assistant City Manager Patty Hoppenstedt.
I'd also like to echo City Manager Gore's comments that I am so honored to work with such tremendous, dedicated staff within the city of DeKalb, and I wish all the staff members a very happy holiday, as well as all members of the community, and thank you every member of the city of DeKalb staff for their hard work and dedication to the community. I can firsthand, name several employees who have made tremendous sacrifices personally to serve the community, because city staff does have the best interests of the community in mind as well. So, thank you, staff.
Chief Lowry.
Just wanted to say Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to everybody here in our community. And bear in mind that many police officers will be working throughout the holidays and miss their holiday time with their families. So it is a huge sacrifice, and I want to acknowledge that and thank them. Thank you.
Molly Talkington.
Well, happy holidays to everyone, but otherwise, no report.
Fire Chief Eric Hicks.
Just want to let everybody know, on December 20th, we'll be hosting our last CPR class of the year, so if anyone needs a CPR card at the end of the year, please get a hold of us. It'll also be posted on our website and Facebook. So happy holidays, everyone. Have a good holiday.
Community Development Director, Jo Ellen Charlton.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick items. I did want to comment about the success of the Chamber's recent Taste of the Holidays event. It was held 2 Saturdays ago. We met with the Chamber last week, and they were expressing to us that the event was a huge success. They sold over 100 tickets at $30 a piece to various people to come into the downtown after hours and try some food and wine and shop in their stores. The Chamber's assistant helped organize that event, and the purpose of it was to really reintroduce people back to the downtown, and they were happy to report that many residents who haven't come to the downtown came to this event and were surprised at some of the stores and the offerings that were there, so that was real positive in that respect, as well as some out-of-town guests who came, as well as students that participated in the event. The weekend was also something that they provided over 500 carriage rides for kids and other people in the downtown, so I think it was a really successful event, and I know the Chamber is very interested in continuing things like that in the future to promote the downtown. I also want to wish everybody happy holidays. Especially want to reach out to the various groups that ComDev works with. We serve over a dozen commissions, committees, meetings, groups that we meet with on a pretty regular basis, and we really appreciate the collaborative effort that all of those people on those groups uses to work with staff and kind of move in the right direction on many of the issues that we face. We do look forward in the future next year to continuing that effort, and wish everybody happy holidays. Thank you.
Public Works Director Tim Holdeman.
Thank you, Mayor. As we were reminded this evening, we are in snow and ice season, and ask residents to be cautious in driving, particularly when they see a snowplow. Please stay at least 5 car lengths back behind the snowplow. A reminder that when the snow is greater than 2 inches, that the parking prohibition on snow routes is in effect. I too would like to wish everyone Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, and also thank the Public Works and Public Safety employees who sacrifice so much of their holidays for our safety and our good. Thank you.
Human Resources Director Chris Randall.
Well, I also echoing all my peers' comments, and I also want to make a comment. This time of the year is the time that not only we think about budget, but we also reflect on the year that passed by. And as I reflect, I'm very grateful and thankful to work with a wonderful staff, elected body. We collectively, we are the blood that flows in the veins of this organization, and together we can make a difference. I wish everybody a wonderful holidays, and we'll be here next year.
Finally, IT Director Mark Thorson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be as brief as I can on this. Enterprise Resource Planning Project. Just a brief catch up on that. We're looking at finance, human resources, and public works asset management, being able to make those records electronic and make those processes electronic, and trying to help facilitate more efficient processes in the city. We are at a stage where staff has gone through all of the demonstrations and worked with all of the vendors, and we've come out with a grading system, and we've made our recommendation. We are looking to work with that recommended vendor at this point, going through our due diligence, and we hope to have something, recommendation to you very soon on that, with more information as well. Additionally, the city Wi-Fi project we're working on this. This initial infrastructure project that we had spoken about with the intergovernmental agreement between the city and Northern Illinois University. We're working to get sort of an infrastructure assessment, which we've already begun. We're also looking at getting pricing for any infrastructure improvements that have to occur in order to kick that going. And we anticipate that that's going to be completed in late spring, early summer. So with that, I'd like to say happy holidays and thank you all.
And happy holidays to everyone. Thank you, Mark. There is no item for executive session tonight, so we will not be calling for a recess. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn the city council meeting.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
We're adjourned.
What's up?
Get well.
I'm gonna try.
I don't see you before then. Have a Merry Christmas.
You guys will